My name is Megan McLaughlin, and along with Il Young Moon, we will be the meeting managers today for the work session. While we are waiting on 4 additional school board members to arrive, we are able to at least proceed with the presentation from our guests here this morning, and we're so thrilled to have an array of experts and voices here for discussion on the FCPSOn, which is about our rollout of one-to-one digital devices at our high schools here in Fairfax County. So with that, I will turn it over to, is it Dr. Sloan?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to Ms. McLaughlin and Mr. Moon for helping serve as meeting managers and helping us finalize and prepare this presentation for today. We're very excited to have the opportunity to share with the board and the community a lot of great things that have been happening with FCPSOn recently. And what we're going to try to cover is actually quite a bit of content today, so you'll see our outcomes for the meeting. The first piece of our meeting, we're going to focus on our Year 3 evaluation from Johns Hopkins University. And I want to make sure to start out by introducing Dr. Jennifer Morrison, who I think many of our board members are familiar with. This is the 3rd year that she's been serving as the lead program evaluator for us. And she, again, is from Johns Hopkins University, the Center for Research and Reform in Public Education. And we were hoping to have Dr. Ross, the director of that center, here with us today, but he unfortunately is quite ill, but would be happy to follow up with any specific board questions that you might want to direct directly to him. The evaluation report, I want to make sure that everybody understands that Johns Hopkins is doing is focused on last school year, the 18-19 school year. So it does not have anything to do with the high school rollout that happened this summer and this fall. It's looking back at last year's results. Then the second part of the presentation is going to be talking about some of the highlights from our high school rollout. And we have a panel of stakeholders here to help us with that part of the discussion. I want to introduce everybody. Martin Grimm is here, our principal of Hayfield Secondary School. I thought I heard somebody trying to clap. Yeah, go ahead. You don't have to hold back the applause. That's fine. That's great. Stefan Toussaint is here as a student senior at Hayfield Secondary School, so we're excited to have him here. William Shallon is a junior at Oakton High School. Margaret Sisler is a school-based technology specialist at Westfield High School. Rachel Baxter is a teacher at McLean High School. And Heather Neumann, is that correct, is a parent at Franklin Middle School. So they're going to help us with the presentation talking about the high school rollout and some of the ongoing supports. And then the final piece of the presentation, we're going to talk about opportunities for expansion to middle school. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Morrison to get us started with the program evaluation from last year.
Thank you for the introduction. And actually, Dr. Ross was in DC. He flew in from Memphis and then was so sick overnight that he flew back. So our apologies, but he had every intention of being here with me today. All right, so as background, the Phase 1 schools consisted of both the Chantilly Pyramid schools and the e-learning backpack schools, and they concluded their 3rd year of the FCPSOn implementation in spring of 2019. And I think it's also important to remind everyone that the implementation timeline varied in the e-learning backpack schools. So for example, with the Chantilly Pyramid schools, they all started 3 years ago, full implementation school-wide. Whereas in the e-learning backpack schools, it varied. So one school might have had 1 grade the first year, expanded to another grade. It was just a different sort of timeline implementation. All right, and then just a preview of Year 3 findings. We definitely received positive impressions of FCPSOn by the stakeholders that we spoke with. The stakeholders described a notable increase in student engagement, which was an important outcome of the initiative. We heard that teacher practices were beginning to emphasize collaboration and learner-centered instruction. Importantly, teacher PD needs were definitely met more so in this most recent year than in Year 2. And we did hear a desire for increased peer learning strategies, particularly on blended learning and just teaching strategies for incorporating technology. We also heard that one of the greatest strengths of the initiative was equity among students, so providing access to resources and tools that students might not otherwise have had. And then one of the main challenges that we heard was in students' responsible use of technology and increasing teachers' purposeful use of technology in the classroom. So our participants for the Year 3 evaluation included all the Phase 1 schools. So that was 9 schools in the Chantilly Pyramid and 6 schools that participated in the Virginia Department of Education e-learning backpack grant. So again, the Chantilly Pyramid schools fully implemented FCPSOn in 2016-17, and 3 of the e-learning backpack schools implemented school-wide in 2016-17, and 3 others partially implemented during the first year and have then fully implemented as of the most recent year. So data sources, I'll cover very quickly because I know all the details are in the report. We conducted classroom observations in 7 schools. We randomly selected classrooms to observe for 20 minutes each. We did a total of 30 observations in Chantilly Pyramid schools and 14 in e-learning backpack schools. We conducted focus groups in 7 Phase 1 schools and four Chantilly Pyramid and 3 e-learning backpack schools for student focus groups. And these students were randomly selected based on those that returned parental permission. We conducted parent focus groups. These were virtual. We invited a random selection of 27 parents. Or no, we invited 40-something parents, but only 27 joined. We didn't have a very good response rate. And then we conducted teacher focus groups in 7 Phase 1 schools, 4 Chantilly Pyramid and 3 e-learning backpack. We randomly selected 7 SBITs for interviews, and then we conducted principal interviews with all the Phase 1 principals. Then we had questionnaires for teachers, students, and parents. The teacher questionnaire had a response rate of 73.9 overall, which is pretty good for research when you're begging teachers to respond to a questionnaire. Our student questionnaire had an overall response rate of 87.4% in Chantilly Pyramid, and it was lower in e-learning backpack at 27%. Very good Chantilly Pyramid school student response rate. Our parent questionnaire, we don't 100% know the response rate for that one because it was hard to ascertain how many parents belong to children in Fairfax County, but we did have 1,147 responses from parents, though it was open to all Phase 1 parents. So main findings for the evaluation, we've got the logic model presented on the screen that I know you've seen before because we've presented it previously, but it presents that professional development in year 1 would lead to the measurable outcomes in the center, which include teacher practice, access to and use of technology, a change in the learning environment, and student engagement, which would then affect student content area knowledge and ultimately portrait of a graduate skills. So we're going to start with our results related to professional development. In the most recent year, all principals indicated that they continue to have a flexible approach to teachers' starting point and progress in the initiative. But one thing that we saw different the most recent years was that they had started to establish clear expectations for teachers in terms of implementation of technology and instructional quality. SBITs are continued to be viewed as highly successful and important component of the initiative, and they make very strong contributions to the operation of FCPSOn in Phase 1 schools. And in the most recent year, they've taken on a more instructional leadership and student-facing responsibilities related to technology. One of the important findings was that professional development has notably improved this year for teachers from both Chantilly Pyramid and e-learning backpack schools. Teachers described increased choice in professional development opportunities, which was an important recommendation from year 2. And they also reported an increased frequency of formal peer-to-peer opportunities, so peer-to-peer learning opportunities during professional development. On the teacher questionnaire, teachers in both groups were more likely to agree this year, as compared to previously, that they were sufficiently prepared to implement FCPSOn and teacher practices specific to the initiative. Elementary teachers were significantly more likely to agree that they felt prepared than high school teachers, but both groups increased roughly 10 percentage points from the previous year's survey. And then in our second section, we'll talk about the intermediary or measurable outcomes. So on the screen is questionnaire results from our teacher survey. And here we're showing the teacher practices that were most frequently reported by teachers in the Phase 1 schools. So the most frequent practices were facilitating cooperative or collaborative learning, facilitating differentiated learning, promoting individualized learning, where students work alone with or without a computer, using digital resources, and delivering electronic assessments. And compared to last year, we did see a decline in the frequency that some teachers were facilitating project or inquiry-based approaches to instruction and cooperative or collaborative learning experiences. But both Chantilly Pyramid and e-learning backpack teachers reported increasing the frequency they use online or digital textbook resources. And then what you don't see on the screen, because there's only so much space, is that teachers were less likely to report planning opportunities for students to practice portrait of a graduate skills, fostering cross-curricular connections, and involving students in designing their own learning experiences. So where these are the most prevalent, the others might need additional professional development. In our interviews and focus groups, we found a prominence of the workshop model in classrooms as reported by teachers and SPITs, and this is rather than the teacher as the sole source of knowledge for students standing at the front of the classroom and lecturing. Teachers describe themselves as more flexible in terms of how students demonstrate their learning, including the time, place, and pace at which they complete tasks. They described letting go of certain instructional practices, increasing opportunities for students to take more responsibility for their learning. Teachers also described increased opportunities for and ease of providing differentiated material and communicating with students given the presence of technology. And our classroom observations provided evidence that inquiry-based learning experiences, real-world contexts, and more self-directed learning are widespread in the FCPSOn classrooms. And also, teachers and SPITs emphasized the importance of Google Classroom to their practices. One of the important lines of research in technology integration is looking at teachers' technology self-efficacy and technology beliefs. And just as we found in the previous year, teachers have positive perceptions of technology. And they're presenting this year an increased reliance and integration of technology into teaching. So teachers of younger grades, such as the Chantilly Pyramid Elementary Schools, were more positive and more reliant on technology as some of the teachers in the secondary schools. But the majority of both groups of teachers agreed that integrating technology into instruction supports learning, which I think is important. And also the vast majority of teachers agree that the culture of their school supports the use of technology-enhanced learning to support student learning experiences. We did observe a notable increase in the degree to which teachers agreed that the culture of their school supports the use of tech-enhanced instruction as compared to last year. And there was a modest increase in the degree to which teachers agreed that integrating technology into instruction supports learning. And then in terms of teachers' technology self-efficacy, we asked these same items last year, and we found that overall there was increased technology self-efficacy among teachers in both Chantilly Pyramid and e-learning backpack schools. During our focus groups, we heard that teachers have a smarter use of technology this year. So they're described by principals and SPITs as better decision makers this year regarding when to use technology, and they're more comfortable teaching in a technology-enhanced environment. And teachers also describe themselves as smarter users of technology, integrating technology-based tools and content, and they celebrated their own progress as effective teachers. Then we also surveyed students on their technology self-efficacy, and we heard overall that students generally have high technology self-efficacy. Older students are more likely to agree with prompts related to using their computer to complete assignments and it being an important part of their school day. Younger students are more likely to agree that their computer works well than the older students, which, yeah. We did observe some changes in student self-efficacy related to technology since last year, or year two, most notably within the e-learning backpack schools. So here, students were more likely to agree during the most recent year that their computer is an important part of every school day, and that using the computer makes turning in homework and completing assignments easy. And then in our student focus groups, we heard that overall usage by students has increased, and the computer skills of students have increased. And students are most likely to be using the computer along with traditional materials, so it's not just a device in front of the kids every day. We did ask students about their technology use this year. And as you can see, these are the most frequent use of devices because we asked a lot of different questions on how they're using devices. But younger students are more likely to use devices for collaboration and educational games. Middle school students are more likely to use it for feedback and collaboration and media. High school students are more likely to use devices at home and to create content, such as PowerPoint, presentations, drawings, web pages. And overall, students are most often using devices to complete work outside of class, access information, collaborate, and to communicate with their peers or their teachers. We also administered a questionnaire to parents, and we found that the majority of parents appeared to have positive perceptions of technology, so you can see that in all of the blue. Blue is good, red is bad. Importantly, parents agreed that technology skills are important for their child to acquire, as well as the importance of positive digital citizenship and learning appropriate online behavior. And the majority of parents agreed that it's important for their child to be exposed to technology as part of their learning. The next section of our evaluation model looked at the learning environment. Our classroom observations in Chantilly Pyramid schools revealed that about 2/3 of the classrooms were arranged to support student choice and collaborative work. So this would be different than the traditional classroom that has just rows of desks in a room. This would have different seating arrangements. So multiple seating options were particularly prominent in elementary schools. High schools in general, so e-learning backpack and Chantilly Pyramid, or Chantilly High School, were much less likely to offer multiple seating options. The student engagement, I think, is a really important part of the evaluation model, and this emerged as a key outcome in our evaluation. So teachers were asked on the survey to indicate the degree to which technology has affected student engagement, and responses indicated that 3/4 of teachers in both Chantilly Pyramid and e-learning backpack schools agreed that technology has contributed positively to student engagement this year. And this is a marked increase in levels of agreement from the previous year, so up 13.4 and 20 points respectively. Teachers tended to agree that students are motivated to use technology during learning in the classroom, to support their learning outside of the classroom, and to support self-directed learning opportunities. In our interviews and focus groups, we found that stakeholders described an increased student engagement as a result of the ease of communication between teachers and students and between students, and the immediacy of access to content and materials facilitated by the presence of the personal device. The most frequent response from teachers regarding the impact of the initiative on students was related to increased student engagement and increased accountability for learning. Teachers often related increased student engagement to increased student choice. Students are more engaged because they have more options that suit their learning needs and learning preferences and interests. And then in terms of outcomes, we'll first talk about student content and area knowledge and then portrait of a graduate skills. On our teacher survey, a large majority of teachers indicated agreement that technology has contributed positively to student achievement in the classroom this year, and levels of agreement were comparable to the previous year. With regards to learners with 504s, IEPs, and English language learners, principals credited FCPSOn with providing them greater access to differentiated materials in various forms of media. They found that the devices assist learners in communication, particularly in written expression. In focus groups, all parents were asked to describe how the introduction of school-wide devices has affected their child's learning and enjoyment of school. Feedback in the focus groups was mixed, though primarily negative, but I think it is important to understand that we spoke to a very small handful of parents in the focus groups, and the questionnaire data suggest the majority of parents are supportive of the initiative and agree that technology skills are important for their child to learn at school. And teachers also described an increase in students' skills related to research, problem solving, and basic computer skills. They emphasized the prominence of self-guided learning in their classrooms, and the teachers and principals tended to speak in terms of how students learn rather than an actual effect. So they're under more flexible conditions and using more of their own decision-making and how they want to learn. So for portrait of graduate skills, Compared to last year, teachers from both Chantilly Pyramid and e-learning backpack schools were more likely to agree overall that their students had improved in these skills. And actually, e-learning backpack teachers were more likely to have indicated improvement than Chantilly Pyramid teachers, but this could be an artifact of implementation. So Chantilly Pyramid all started in year 1, and e-learning backpack has done a more gradual implementation. Our qualitative findings suggest that the Portrait of a Graduate attributes in Phase 1 schools have overall focused more explicitly on naming and promoting these attributes this year as compared to the previous year. While some schools work explicitly on certain attributes for a whole year, other schools indicated that it doesn't play much of a role at their school. Portrait of a Graduate attributes were observed in roughly half of our classroom observations, and the most prominent theme to emerge were students as communicators and collaborators. That seems to be the heavy focus in schools. So in our questionnaires, interviews, focus groups, we asked what are the strengths of the initiative from all of our stakeholders. Educators were more generally in agreement that the greatest strength of the initiative is the increased technological equity and accessibility for all students. Here, participants spoke about guaranteed access to the actual tool or resources needed to be successful. For principals and SPETs, the greatest success was building the capacity of their teachers in their buildings. Several commented on the positive changes in their teachers' attitudes, collaboration, and instructional practices as a result of the initiative. SPETs emphasized the movement from teachers as instructors to more learner-centered focus. As again, I mentioned earlier, teachers are becoming more smarter use of technology resources, and SPETs also described growing buy-in of the initiative across teachers. In focus groups, the benefits that teachers cited were students are engaged in a type of learning that prepares them to be successful, and that teachers are able to meet individual student needs with ease and with meaningful content. In our questionnaire, one of the most frequently identified strengths was the presence of technology that expands or enhances learning, or that technology helps make them a better teacher in general. Students also consider the impact on their learning as the greatest benefit of the initiative across all grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school. Learning accessibility was the most frequently noted benefit of the initiative by students expressed in focus groups. And then at the conclusion of our parent questionnaire, we had an item asking if parents had any additional thoughts they would like to share about the FCPSOn initiative or experience, and the most frequent feedback from parents at all grade levels was related to the helpfulness, usefulness, and assistive aspects of the program for completing school-related tasks. Of course, there are challenges with any initiative. One of the first themes was that the age and capacity of devices. So stakeholders often indicated that students and teachers face challenges when devices are in poor condition, mismanaged, or become outdated. They described barriers to maintaining technical capacity in terms of lost charges, bad batteries, aging laptops, Wi-Fi connectivity, and processing speed. Students are quick to note if a device is slow. Technical issues such as these strongly affect students' learning experiences and delay students' progress or engagement as they rely on the school-based technology team to repair or replace their laptop issues that arise. And then a second theme was maintaining high-quality instruction. In focus groups, teachers most frequently cited the challenge of the pace at which they can receive approval to purchase or use new software programs. In the open-ended section of our questionnaire, teachers noted difficulty in staying on top of all the new tools and resources available to them, and being sure that they're implementing technology-enhanced instruction in the most appropriate ways. Parents at all grade levels also provided feedback related to the desire for a balanced approach to instruction that includes both technology and traditional classroom experiences. And then finally, supporting teachers was a big theme. When discussing challenges, SPETs emphasized the effort required to support the constant influx of new teachers who lack experience in general and tenure specifically in a technology-enhanced classroom. And then also in e-learning backpack schools, SPETs described a lack of school-wide focus on technology-enhanced learning as a general challenge. So in terms of looking forward as the initiative expands, teachers from both of the elementary focus groups said they need training related to online safety and digital citizenship, Teachers also recommended explicit instruction of computer skills like digital literacy to students and more restriction on students' personal devices. Teachers expressed the need to explore, master, and share with their peers. Teachers also want more exposure to new products and ways of teaching. Teachers are interested in learning about new products, but as an important caveat, they need this information gathered for and catered to them. Their desire to know more overlapped with a preference for content and age-specific information. Teachers want training on when to use and when not to use technology. In focus groups, teachers were asked to make specific recommendations to the district for consideration as the initiative expands. Teachers implied that learning Google Classroom was a mandatory first step for teachers at implementing schools, and that the utility of Google Classroom would increase if parents had access to their child's digital classroom space. Recommendations from parents fall into 3 categories: restricting student access to inappropriate content at school, providing more balance between technology use and traditional instructional practices, and introducing keyboarding and software skills into coursework. So the present findings from schools now in their 3rd year of implementation indicate that stakeholders are strongly invested in the initiative's success and are more comfortable overall with a one-to-one learning environment. Important differences in implementation are observed between the Phase 1 schools, specifically eLearning Backpack and Chantilly Pyramid. But aspects and principals in both types of schools commended their teachers for being more effective users of technology tools and, as a result, more flexible and effective teachers. Findings also suggest that students are more engaged and accountable learners. Students have gained important skills and embraced an emerging emphasis on self-guided learning. And then guaranteed access to a personal computer has succeeded in leveling the playing field among students of varying socioeconomic backgrounds, learning interests, and needs.
All right, thank you very much. So I really appreciate Dr. Morrison's high-level summary of an immense amount of information, data, and analysis that she has done with her team. There's a 131-page full narrative report posted on Board Docs that we certainly could dig into in more detail. And I know that the board is going to have questions for Dr. Morrison, and that's great. What we want to do, though, is continue with the presentation and hold those questions until we come to the very end. And if I could borrow the clicker, thank you. The next part of the presentation is we want to talk about the things that actually have happened recently with expansion to all of our high schools in FCPS, which has been, I think, a very exciting initiative and very successful rollout. And what we want to do when we talk about that work is to try to bring in as many opportunities for you to see and hear from the people that are leading and experiencing this initiative in our schools. So to start that, we're going to share a brief video of FCPSOn at one school, Robinson Secondary School, and then we're going to come back and talk with our panel.
All right, come on. All right, so joinpd.com, Zesty Olive.
At Robinson Secondary, we started the planning process for FCPSOn last year. We spent the whole year planning and discussing concerns that we had, and so I think we were well prepared and ready for the implementation and the distribution. We had student tech assistants that worked with us all summer to help get things ready and get things aligned. Students and families were able to come in and access their computers and get the support they needed to get everything set up in the summer.
Really started looking into all the different apps that we can be using in classes over the past 3 years, and we've been using them as much as possible without the computers. And then this year, the amazing thing is now we have the computers and we're able to implement it much more seamlessly. We're kind of light years ahead of where we could have been had we not started so early.
Everybody's using the same type of technology, so no one is at a disadvantage from anyone else. And they can use those computers when they go home to tackle all their assignments, so everybody's starting on the same foot.
We are able to check students' reading levels because they have a set of articles for a reading check. After they read about 8 articles, we will have a better idea of their reading level. Then we can change the articles according to their lexile level so that they can better read and become stronger in their comprehension skills. So this is what's helping close the achievement gap.
Turning in work's a lot simpler. You can work a lot more from home. Everything's more accessible.
I recently did an assignment with my partner, shoulder partner in history. I could easily share with her, and we collaborated and shared comments with each other to see if we agreed on this or we didn't agree, and we talked about it later in class.
Our size is our greatest strength, but it's also our greatest challenge. And so now that all students have the same form of technology, we've been able to form Google Classrooms by grade level, and we're able to disseminate information to students on a regular basis, and then they're able to access that no matter where they are. If they miss school or if they miss seeing the Good Morning Robinson news show, they have all of that information at their fingertips in that Google Classroom, which we weren't able to do before. It's going to pay us dividends in the end because kids are able to get the same information across the board.
So as we transition back to the PowerPoint, I think in that video, just a 2-minute, 30-second video, you're seeing some of the themes that we really aspire to with this particular initiative around equity of access, making sure that all of our students have access to information on an equitable basis, the ideas of communication and collaboration skills, students working together, both inside the classroom, outside of the classroom, and you heard briefly, I think, in that video, a little bit about the work that schools have been doing to get prepared and to get ready for this. So we're going to transition back to, oh, you're fine. That's great. One more. Yeah. So this is a slide that kind of speaks to some of the numbers, and we have a document posted on Board Docs as well that called FCPS by the numbers that goes into a little bit more detail, but 58,000 devices deployed in schools, and that was because all of our central office departments collaborated and worked hard together, but also because of, more importantly, the leadership at the school on the part of our principals, our SBITs, and students who were helping to make sure that everything was smooth in terms of the rollout and the access so students had their devices to start off the school year. This idea of equity of access, again, we've given out 252 MiFi devices to students that don't have access at home so that they now have access to the internet at home, which is amazing. And we've had very few students opt out of this initiative, only 133 students in all of our high schools together. We can talk more about the professional development that was mentioned in that video, the learning innovation team work that's happening to make sure that the schools are getting support at least a year ahead of the implementation of the devices to make sure that the teachers are ready and that the students will be ready. And then, as we heard in the Johns Hopkins evaluation, one of our needs is continuing to make sure that we have strong digital citizenship program, and we've continued to expand our digital citizenship program with required teacher training and required lessons for students and a lot of resources for parents as well. So you might remember this graphic. It essentially summarizes the main elements of the what and the why behind FCPSOn. And what I'd like to do is ask our panelists just briefly to speak to one of these areas that have been identified from kind of their stakeholder perspective. And I wanted to start with Martin, if that was okay, with this idea of equitable access to technology.
Okay. So very quickly, I think the equitable access, sorry, PE teacher's voice, the equitable access has been key for us. You know, I think, so very quickly, we asked our teachers to use something called Pear Deck. We bought Pear Deck. Pear Deck attaches to your Google Slides. It's very interactive. And so if I'm looking at my ESOL students, I'm looking at my special education students, I'm looking at our students that need social emotional support, Pear Deck does all of that, and it's interactive, and it's either private or it's very public, depending on how you use it. And you know, when we think about equitable access, I think about my students who don't have a computer at home, who now have a computer at home, and I think that's something that has been brought up, and I think that's kind of one of the more obvious ones. I think the other piece, though, when you think about equitable access, think about access to the actual curriculum. So, you know, we talk about, Marzano calls it the K-22 curriculum. If you do everything the way you're supposed to do it, it takes 22 years to get through a 12-year curriculum. And so what we do is we emphasize essential standards. What's the heartbeat? So I'm going to just use an example in biology, for example. There's a cell, and we need students to essentially understand the workings of a cell. And it was brought up a couple different ways. When we ask teachers to differentiate, and they can assign access to 30 students 17 different reading levels. We can have one student who's reading about cellular biology at the college level, and we can have one student who's reading about it at the 5th grade level. And all of those students and everybody in between on that continuum are getting the essential standards and the essential learning that they need. So when I think about the equitable access, I do think about our kids that don't have it at home, who need this, who literally need this in order to be in the 21st century because they don't have access at home. I also think about all the kids, though, for 200 years who have been sitting in classrooms at different reading levels who don't have that same equitable access to the curriculum. And now, and you know, teachers got a tough job, you know, and we say, well, you need to differentiate. And they go, okay, how do we do that? This is one of the ways we do that. And being able, and I just can't emphasize that enough, that we have students accessing curriculum, or curricula, I guess, that they have not been able to do before because teachers can differentiate it. And here's the best part. Nobody knows what I'm reading on my computer. I don't have a different colored book. I don't have a book that has more pictures and words. Nobody knows what's on my computer. It's very private, and so we are also seeing a greater engagement. I got a whole bunch of other stuff written down too, but.
All right, very good. Stefan, we want to make sure the mic is on.
Yeah, like equity, like I definitely think that's like a great thing to touch up upon, like a little bit background. I'm from Louisiana. I'm new to the FCPS system, you know. Like I got here 2 years ago, my junior year. And like before then, like I came from an iPad school that was like kind of on the technology route. But coming to FCPS my first year, like having the paper and everything like that, I feel like if we would compare it to now, I feel like we're moving faster and moving quicker. Like the source, like our, the curriculum is just more rigorous and like we learn quicker. Like students, like me, for example, I like to learn like through YouTube and like other videos and other things like that. Like thanks to having the computers and stuff like that, we can now all learn on our own ways. So like some students like to read, some like to listen to audiobooks, some like to watch YouTube videos. So like we can all learn separately and but all come to the same goal at the end of the day. And I feel like the computers bring like such an amazing way for all of us to be on the same level and all get to the same goal at the end of the day. So we can all just like learn together better. I feel like that's like the great thing about the equity, the access to the computers.
That's awesome. Thank you. William?
Sure. So I just want to touch on the digital citizenship part. I think that it's very important for students to consider the ramifications of the things that they do online. Nowadays, it's very easy to click post and not think about what you're actually posting. One of the things I like to think about is if one day I were to run for president, how would this come back to bite me in the butt? So I think that...
Or just apply for a job.
Or a job, yeah. But I think that when students go out into the world outside of school, whether it be employers or trying to hold a government position or really any position where you're being viewed by many people, we have to consider the things we've done in the past and if they're going to come back to haunt us in the present. And I think it's important that in school, not only do we learn about our standard topics like reading, social studies, those topics that we've learned throughout school, but also things that affect us in a different time. Before, we didn't have these issues, and I think it's an important thing to address, to teach students, you know, this is something that's acceptable, you know, to post to, here's what good sources look like for research, here's what unbiased sources look like for research, and I think that the implementation of FCPSOn has given those students that equitable access to those unbiased, peer-reviewed resources that also makes it easier for them to get their work done.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Margaret, in your role as an ESPIT?
I'm going to talk a little bit about professional learning and echo much of what was said in the report from Johns Hopkins. But I think what's been most impactful is building this team of teacher leaders, the learning innovation team at every school. These folks are focusing on meaningful learning experiences for all students, and how do we help our colleagues provide that for every student. So it's not just equitable access to the device, but equitable access to the kind of learning so that every student has that. And it looks different in every school because we're all in very different places. So professional learning has shifted from everybody in the cafeteria or the lecture hall learning the same thing on the same day to being much more flexible with choice. The school planning days are critical for this, and today, in fact, at Westfield, they're engaged in that learning right now. I think you were telling me same at McLean, where they have choices. They're learning from each other. So they're seeing each other as experts and then learning from each other. The power of visiting each other's classrooms and learning what teachers say, what one teacher says is working in her classroom, how do I apply that and then in my content is powerful. That is something that I don't think we can underestimate. And it doesn't just stop with our teachers. Our admin and our SPITs are learning and growing as well. One of the things we've been able to be involved with are the learning walks, where we visit each other's school together, the administrators and the SPITs, and we get to go out and build our own coaching skills, see what's happening in the classroom, and talk about how would we coach to the next level with that teacher? What would we encourage? How could we take it even further so students have more opportunities to practice their POG skills, to really engage in communication and collaboration in a lot of our schools?
All right, thank you. And Rachel, from your perspective as a teacher?
Hi, everybody. So, yeah, not only am I a teacher at McLean High School, also a K-12 FCPS alum. So, yeah, this learning process started with me in kindergarten at Fairfax County a long time ago. So, FCPSOn, I want to focus on Portrait of a Graduate and how FCPSOn is helping my students reach Portrait of a Graduate. One of the huge changes I've noticed this year is the ability to implement project-based learning and inquiry-based learning. At McLean, teachers did a lot to sort of prepare for that. But one of the differences is that last year, if I was implementing a project-based learning unit, it required technology, and it meant that other teachers within my collaborative team could not be implementing the same project-based learning unit. And so looking at Portrait of a Graduate, even my own Portrait of a Graduate, in the ability to collaborate with my colleagues has increased this year. It's helping my students reach Portrait of a Graduate because they are really able to direct their own learning. So looking at being goal-directed and resilient individuals, they're all working towards that same learning outcome, but they might be taking different paths to get there. They're collaborating together on the computers to create some sort of meaningful product that they will then hopefully share with an authentic audience. They're communicating about their learning. They're sharing their learning and talking about what they're learning and how they're learning it. And then they're becoming creative and critical thinkers because thinking critically that William brought up in evaluating sources and doing research on these computers and evaluating the bias or the perspective of various sources, and then using the information that they're gathering to create something that's related to a project. And then ultimately, by using the computers on a regular basis, they're becoming better ethical and global citizens. They're learning more about the world around them. They're learning more about responsible technology use. And one big change that I've noticed with my own practices and with other teachers in my building is that we are explicitly including Portrait of a Graduate more than we have in years past through FCPSOn. We're talking about it, students are reflecting on it, we're assessing using the Portrait of a Graduate rubrics, and so Portrait of a Graduate is really embedded in everything that we're doing this year because of FCPSOn.
Thank you very much. And Rachel participated last week in our all-county principal meeting panel where we had a group of teachers provide exhibitions of the work that they're doing around Portrait of a Graduate. And she brought her presentation in the back, which I know she'd be happy to talk to folks more about at the break if you're interested. So thank you very much. And Heather, from your perspective as a parent?
Hello, I'm a parent of a 13-year-old in Franklin and a 20-year-old at ECU. So I'm going to talk about kind of how I see this effort, how it fits into my older student, and how it fits into really my life, right? So, and as a parent, I like to say I'm raising adults because that's the end state. I don't want them to be kids forever, right? And as part of that, I try to put my kids into kind of successively more, complex and world-like experiences, right? And prepare them for the tasks that they're going to have to face every day without me, right? Succeed in school, succeed in, the world, be worldly, be able to make their life what they want it to be. I used to think at some point my kids are going to be better at technology than me. I'm still waiting for that day, so hopefully get on it. I still got one left in school. My older one still hasn't gotten there. But it's everywhere. It's not going away. We're not going back to a day where it doesn't exist. It's the tool. It's the tool I use every day that my older son uses in college. And, I think back, I have a 13-year-old and I finally have something similar in my day, right? I bring my computer home at night. I charge it. I go to work. My computer is my office, right? I have it. I use phone calls. Use it for phone calls. I use it for meetings. I use it to produce work products. I collaborate with people worldwide on my computer. It happens on bad weather days, happens on weekends, right? And I have to manage that. My son uses it at VCU, right? They told him what computer he needed geared to his degree. He gets his textbooks on it. He takes his tests on it. He hands in his assignments, right? Everything is on the computer. God help me if we ever lose one, right? But it absolutely requires fluency. And fluency happens with repetition, right? Every day you do something, you get better, you expand, you get curious, you do something more. When I was in school, we memorized, right? That's not the skill the kids need today. They need to search, they need to evaluate, they don't need to regurgitate, they need to build on and move past. And this is really kind of a fundamental opportunity for them. It's baseline, and we're a little behind. It's an opportunity to experience the future. And they're being exposed to it every day. And they're going to get better. And hopefully one day I'll have a kid who knows more about a computer than I do.
That will happen. We're going to make you that promise.
Hopefully. Still waiting.
So thank you to Heather and to all of our panelists. I know that the board is going to have questions for you, but before we do that, there's just a couple more slides that I'd like to go through real quickly. But again, thank you very much for your input, because I think each of you touched on some really important big ideas with why we're doing this initiative. One of the things that we're committed to in certainly our partnership with Johns Hopkins is a testament to this, is continuing to improve our work and to understand what do we need to do in this initiative to continue to innovate it and make it better. And one of the things that came out last year was this idea, and we heard it from our parents as well, of this need to have a balanced use of instructional technology. We're on our technology so much at home, whether it's on computers, our phones, video games, television, whatever it might be. We're on our technology a lot just in society today, and adding more technology into the classroom has a contributing impact on that. So we worked very hard to develop these guidelines, and I'm not going to go into them in detail, but certainly be happy to speak to them if the board members have any questions. But we developed these guidelines and put together a toolkit for our teachers this year to help them think about when to use instructional technology and perhaps when not to use instructional technology. And also put together information to provide to our students about how to use technology in healthy ways. Thinking about the limits, thinking about the times that you're on technology a lot and you need to take breaks, just to make sure that you're not straining your vision, for example. So we put together a lot of resources for our teachers and for our students, and we're currently working on a parent toolkit to accompany this as well, which will be out later this year. So we're really excited about this work that we're doing. And finally, we want to talk to you briefly about middle school expansion, because you can hear from all of us up here that we're very excited about this initiative. And we think that there are a lot of different advantages to this, and I'm not going to go through all of them because our panelists have spoken to them, I think, very well. But the big idea continues to be around equity of access, and we're seeing a lot of success with this initiative at our high school already, and we're asking the board to consider including in the FY21 budget support for funding for expansion to the middle school. And I don't know how many of our middle school principals are here in the back, but if you just raise your hand, there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot that took the time to be here today, and they're here because they believe in this initiative and that they're hoping that we're going to be able to expand to the middle school level as well. So just in summary, to think about the associated costs with expansion to middle school, I'm going to ask Lee to explain just this last slide, and then we'll go into discussion with the board.
This slide represents the total cost of middle school implementation over 4 years at $19.7 million. On the expenditure side, the devices are expected to cost about $16 million, and that is $4 million per year for lease costs beginning in fiscal 22 for 4 years. The accessories and preparation services are the sleeves to protect the devices, packaging, that sort of thing. That's $0.8 million across the 4 years. Positions, 4 T-spec positions across the 4 years is $2 million. The current staffing standard for T-specs is 1 per school, and the new T-spec staffing standard is 1 for less than 1,250 students and 1.5 for greater than 1,250 students. So we have 8 middle schools that would get an additional 0.5. Professional development includes program evaluation and device analytics for a total, again, across the 4 years of $0.9 million, a total 19.7. On the revenue side, there's the technology support fee, which is $50 per student, $25 for reduced meal eligibility, and $0 for free meal eligibility, and that is paid by the parents. It's $4.4 million, so that's about $1.1 million per year. The school carryover funding, which is one time, and this is using the same model that we use with high schools, is $20 per pupil in fiscal 21 and $20 per pupil in fiscal 22, and that will come out of their automatic 25% carryover funds. The repurposed textbook per pupil is a permanent change, and 25% of those funds, or about 0.6 per year, will be allocated to FCPSOn for a total of $2.3 million across 4 years. The repurposed replacement equipment, that's about 20% of REOC funding, or $0.7 million per year, for a total of $2.8, so that the total existing funding is $10.7 million. The $9 million is the additional funding that will be needed in future years to be built into the baseline. That works out to be about $2.25 million per year, beginning in fiscal 21. Again, for the total revenues of 19.7 across the 4 years as well.
All right, so thank you very much. I'm going to turn the presentation back over to our meeting managers, and I think we're only about 2 minutes over the allotted time we had, so we did the best we could. We'll turn it back to you for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Presidio. You did an excellent job of really allowing the board to hear not only a comprehensive report from Johns Hopkins, but to also hear from our key educators and students about what it's like on the ground on the front lines. And very much want to express my appreciation, especially to all of our guests, for you taking time on a federal holiday and join the board here. And I am pleased that we now have a full board here to be able to ask questions. So let me first just give a framework for what we're going to be doing here. So again, board members, as you know, you have 3 minutes to share your remarks as well as pose questions. We did a lot for 2.5 hours, knowing that this was going to be a very dense presentation with a lot of areas to discuss. What I would ask is, because our deputy clerk is filling in today, that when you conclude your 3 minutes, and we allow for the panelists to respond to any questions you have, I will come back to you one more time to say, are there any specific next steps that you want recorded, as that will help her to get those logged in before we then review them at the very end. So Ms. Keys-Gamarra, you have a process question?
I do. Are you asking us to get all our questions out, or are you willing to stop the clock if the panel wants to respond?
Yes, we can stop the clock if that's the preference you have. The main thing is, because of the time we've built in, I am anticipating go-backs for board members, so I also want you to know you don't have to try to get it all out in your first attempt. Right now, I only have Ms. Strauss, who's indicated she wants to speak.
Well, thank you very much. This was an informative and very, very important presentation. First, I want to congratulate Fairfax County Public Schools for agreeing to have a research study with Johns Hopkins as we prepared for this rollout. That was one of the best decisions we've made. I know for years there has been questions about when are we going to get to one-to-one. We've watched a lot of the other school divisions who perhaps did not make the best use of their investment in this. So I thank Johns Hopkins. This was extremely informative. And my one question is going to be, how will we continue to evaluate ourselves as we roll this out? So I do think that the results are extremely helpful. And I have to be very proud of McLean High School. All three of my daughters went there, and they are now working in the industry, and they are in their 30s and 40s. And our shared information from our wonderful parent is exactly what we see. Their office is on their computer. Thank you very much. So we are certainly not going back. But I was very pleased to see the findings of access to curriculum, access to differentiation, teachers having the tools now that they need for peer-to-peer support for all of their students, and clearly going forward, it is the tech support for the teachers and the students on an absolute, just turn it around immediately, and being able to finally get to higher level thinking skills, project-based learning, which was part of the portrait of the graduate. Clearly, we couldn't get there until we finally were at one-to-one, because it is the power of that access to curriculum and differentiation that enables us to do project-based learning, to actually evaluate research, and to get to those higher level thinking skills. So thank you for our students, for your comments. And again, I absolutely support going to the middle school. I already have one of my grandchildren is at Lanier. They've already gotten their Dell computer because Fairfax City puts in more money. So she's already using it, and it's great, and it's working just fine. So my one next step question will be our plans for continuing to evaluate ourselves as we go forward. This is a powerful decision that we have made, and we need to make sure that our guardrails are in place, and that we continue to improve and support our teachers and our kids with these very powerful devices. And clearly, digital citizenship will continue to be a question and a need, but that's fine. We just continue on. So thank you all very, very much, and thank you, Johns Hopkins.
All right, if I could address Ms. Strauss's question. So we do have plans to continue the program evaluation. We had a 3-year plan that we had funded with phase 1, essentially, of the program evaluation. That is now complete, and we're in the process of issuing an RFP for phase 2, and we're looking to continue that program evaluation for another 3 to 4 years. So once that RFP process is complete, we would inform the board of the chosen and selected vendor and contract cost. And I would say, though, that I have budgeted the money for the contract cost in the Instructional Services Department budget, so that doesn't need to be a new expenditure.
Thank you, Dr. Presidio. And I now have on deck Ms. Corbett-Sanders, followed by Mr. McElveen, followed by Ms. Derenak-Kofax.
Thank you. This was a great presentation. And it's been fun to watch how it's evolved, and the depth of the presentation and the data and how you present over the 3 years that we really have been talking about FCPSOn. It's great. I do have a couple of questions, because I found, Mr. Grimm, your discussion about equitable access and expanding it to equitable access to the curriculum is something that I think is so important and a part of the discussion that people are not readily in tune with. And so what I would love to know is whether or not you have any metrics as to how many different levels and how often are teachers actually differentiating in the classroom with the access piece. I'm going to stop.
So not right on hand, but we can get that for you. I'm confident of that because we have like Newzilla is just one of the programs that we use, which basically you can assign students readings based on their reading level. They read a couple articles. Newzilla kind of helps tell you where their reading level is, and then that's when you can start assigning. Also through our ESOL and our special education, different programs. So I'm confident that we can do that from the metrics wise. I'm sure we can get that for you.
So as a next step, we would like to have the metrics on equity of access to differentiated learning. And if you could also include in that some information on Newzilla, I think that would be very helpful.
And I'm just going to add a little bit to that response because I'm not sure that Mr. Grimm needs one more thing to do. So that might be something that we could try to do at the division level in terms of looking at access and user statistics in some of our programs. Martin mentioned a few, but No Red Ink is another example. We have very high user statistics across the division. That's a program to support students' writing and grammar needs, and it's very much a differentiated program. We have similar resources in other content areas. So we could try to put something together maybe at the division level and save Martin a little bit of a next step.
That's great. I don't care who provides it to me. I just want to have the information. Similarly, I'd like to have a bit more information on the digital citizenship piece and what you all are doing and how that has impacted by having a single access point instead of kids bringing their own device. How has that helped the learning environment?
So I can give you a qualitative. We now are able, so everybody has some version of what we call SOAR. It's the intervention period. So we're able to now, and my SPITs will kill me right now because we spent a lot of time to get the certification. But we are the Common Sense Media. Thank you. So we were one of the schools that was able to get our Common Sense Media certification, and that a lot of that we did that last year, but now this year, as we can now use that SOAR period, and now everybody has it, and everybody has it, which is different than at the middle school because while we have tried very hard to get computers in the middle school, and we do have them in the middle school, some take 15 minutes to boot up, some don't boot up at all. Now each kid has their own computer and they're responsible for it. So we're able to do much more digital citizenship on the actual device that they're using, as opposed to this hypothetical thing. And again, when a kid is taking it home and they're using it, that lesson sinks in a lot differently than if they're doing it at school, they close it and they go home and there's no computer. So I'm sure there are some other, and I appreciate Sloan's offer to take on all that, and I will accept his offer to take that one on as well.
So just a few other things I'd like to add to that because I do think the issue of digital citizenship is really important. So we have done a lot in the school division over the last several years, and Martin mentioned kind of one of the things in terms of developing the types of programming at a school that would actually earn you external certification as being a school that's being very proactive and very deliberate about teaching students and developing students' digital citizenship skills. And I think William did a really good job of talking about the need and the importance for that. So it's everything from talking to students about, protecting and developing kind of your online digital identity and what that means and what that looks like, to how do you treat others in an online environment, to protecting your own data, your own personal identity, your own security. And we have a ton of information that we do both inside the school but also with parents. We have a very robust website with a lot of resources for parents, videos about how to talk to your students about digital citizenship. And we do a lot of work in our schools where central office staff provide workshops for parents and for teachers around digital citizenship. And if the board wants to get into more detail, we do have Tammy Sisk here. I believe I see she's in the back, yeah. And she leads a lot of our digital citizenship work, so she'd be happy to provide even more detailed responses.
And if I could just add to answer and add to this response, I know in our FCPSOn schools, the backpack schools and in the Chantilly Pyramid, many of the schools pulled together and offered community and pyramid nights where parents could come in and learn about digital citizenship. As the regions look at how they can go out and engage communities more and pyramids in their schools, one of the topics that they are considering and partnering with Tammy and the IT folks and schools and principals and PTA are hosting more of those types evenings on digital citizenship for parents.
Dr. Ivy, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because the next question was actually about how to engage parents in this process of digital citizenship awareness and education. I would actually encourage, and I don't know if it's feasible, but encourage collaborative work efforts between parents and students, since the students are bringing home their notebooks anyway, that's a great opportunity for more hands-on, problem-based learning on digital citizenship for parents and students together.
A few of the sessions that I attended actually did some of that, what you're suggesting, not all, so it's certainly something we can consider, and we certainly can learn from our students as well.
And I
as
hope in
them
multiple
working
languages.
together. Yes, most definitely.
I'm sorry, I'd like to add on to that too. I think that, and we just did one of these ourselves, but we're not the only ones doing it. Also, the digital literacy for the parents.
Right.
So that was very well attended, and we need to do more of that, because there's also a segment of our parents who don't know how to check in on grades, and they are behind their students. So I think that's something that we will continue to do. I think there's more urgency now that the student has the device, as opposed to before when the student didn't have the device.
So as a next step, what I would like to see is, as part of our parent engagement initiatives, that we include digital citizenship and digital literacy, and how they can partner with us and with their students in engaging in the learning process. The last piece that I have is on cell phone usage at the high school level, because a lot of thought and effort went into partnering with the PTA at Fairfax County PTA on the use of cell phones at different levels in our school system. And I would love to know if you have been, I know this is last year's data, but this year, if you've been seeing any decrease in cell phone usage, and if you're actually monitoring how many cell phones are actually going onto the network in the high schools, or those schools that have one-to-one.
We do, as you said, we partner with the County Council of PTAs to develop new guidelines that we put out to all of our schools, and so they're rapidly implementing them. We've seen a lot of schools that have gone out and sent notifications to the parents and to the families. Beginning of the year, it said in as reminders saying these are our new guidelines, and we've seen a lot of positive feedback from both the County Council PTAs and others about the positive. We can tell you how many of those cell phones get onto our Wi-Fi network. However, many of them are only using the cellular network, which we have no way to monitor. So if they're using their cell phones, but basically a lot of this is about classroom management and about we are actually encouraging people not even to have send their kids in with cell phones. But we can tell you how many are getting onto our Wi-Fi network. The other thing that we did this year is we modified the way we manage our bandwidth so that BYOD devices have a much lower priority now than the FCPSOn devices. So even if they get on our Wi-Fi network, it's much slower than they are if they're using their FCPSOn devices. One of the things I also wanted to mention is that we talked about some of the slower machines with part of our e-backpack and pyramid schools. That initiative did not have a refresh built in. The new initiative that we've done with the high schools now has an automatic 4-year refresh. So that's one of the nice positive things about continuing with this, is that we'll be able to get rid of a lot of that old technology that is outdated. So, but yes, we can tell you the ones that connect to the Wi-Fi, but we can't tell you how much they're using it in terms of the cellular network. But Martin may be able to address that from an actual standpoint, and at McLean, our teacher from McLean.
Anecdotally, I mean, I don't have numerical data, but it's a lot easier to manage, and I'm seeing less cell phone usage for non-school related things, because anytime we need technology, whereas last year students might have to use a phone or another BYOD, this year it's really easy to have them put their phones in their backpack where they're not tempted to check their phone, and everything that they need technology-wise for classes on the computer. So it's become a lot easier to manage, and students are using them less.
Well, living in the cellular desert of Mount Vernon, I can tell you that that those metrics in especially Sandburg and some of the schools along the Fort Hunt corridor, it would be very interesting to see those metrics, but less important for me to see them, but more important, I think, for us to share with the parent community, because this was a joint initiative. So as a next step, if you would do that.
And I think our students have some comments to add to this. Stefan.
I definitely feel like there's like a culture now with the devices, with the laptops, that like no phone is like acceptable, and like teachers like they have no tolerance now. Like you just put it away, and like it's understood now. Like, why do you even need a phone? Like in some of my classes, when I see people texting, I get a little bit annoyed myself, because it's like now there's like no excuse at all. Like we understand now, like especially like my AP classes and other things like that. We understand like we're here to learn now, and like now you have the same device and everything like that. So you're just working, and like the laptop just like brings that attitude or that culture to the school and the classroom, I feel.
Sure. So if I could add on to that, the metric of how many student devices or BYOD devices are on the network, I think is not a good way to measure whether or not students are on their phone during class, because although I may bring my phone to school and join it to the network, I may only be using my phone to, do something during lunchtime or during our Cougar time, which is our intervention period. So I think that looking at those metrics, although we may see that students are still bringing their devices to school, I don't think it's a good way to measure whether or not they're actually on them during class. And I think that what you said is very true, that now there's not really an excuse. Since every student has a computer, there's no excuse to be on your phone. You can't say, oh, I'm doing schoolwork. It's very clear that you're not. The one thing I would say, though, is that I do know a lot of students who bring their own computers to school instead of the BYOD devices. So I would say that the bandwidth obviously is a good way to limit students who are on their phones, but also I think that it's important to make sure that students who are bringing their own computers aren't being limited on their network speeds and the work that they can do just because they have chosen not to use a school-issued computer.
Wonderful input. Thank you. I now have on deck Ryan McElveen, followed by Ms. Darnette Koufax, Karen Keys-Gamara, Tom Wilson, Kimberly Dahlia.
Well, we're in for a long ride, so I will try to keep my piece brief. But first of all, I do want to say that I think this rollout has been an unmitigated success, and I think that's due to Sloan, Mary Beth, Margaret. I know you did a lot of work with this as well. I think back, I remember having these conversations in 2012, 2013, and it's incredible to see how far we've come. So I think this is a very proud moment for all of us. I use that as a prelude to saying that I think that we should commit today to the middle school expansion beginning next fall. And so and they didn't pay me, although I will take checks on your way out. But Sloan and Mary Beth, I would like to ask if we chose to today to make that step, or if not, what is the deadline by which we would have to do so?
A lot of it is about, last year we were kind of late in the final decision, so it would be very, very helpful to have that as soon as possible. Dr. Brabrand has already committed to putting this into his proposed budget, so, but in terms of you would not officially approve it until May, but very much would appreciate being able to have the information by January so that we can make sure we get the orders in place and those kind of things so that we aren't scrambling at the very last minute to get all of this work. We got it all done, and that was great, but the more information we have ahead of time. The other thing that happens earlier is we obviously are continuing with professional development. Like you saw in the video, we've talked to our teachers, being able to start that work before we get the devices with our teachers and our staff has been extraordinarily helpful. So we'd love to have the go-ahead today, but we'll take it as soon as we can get it.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in on that? The sooner the better on the sense from the PD, from the teacher side. So us being a secondary school, we've kind of pulled our teachers in the whole way so that I feel like we would be in a little bit different place. I think from one of the things that we did very well, and I do want to say, and thank both, the rollout has been incredibly smooth. It has been incredibly successful, and that was we put a lot of time in PD, a lot of time in PD. And I have teachers that I didn't think in a million years would be using these devices, and they are. Then it's not the whole day, it's in pieces, it's in parts, which is what it's supposed to be. And that's because we had time to do PD. That's because we had time to prepare people. So I would say as soon as we can get teacher mindsets around it's coming, the better off it would be for the teachers.
And so a second question on that is, Sloan, you had mentioned that you have contract funding or something already set aside. I'm just wondering in terms of RFP, like how quickly we can move on that.
Well, the RFP is underway, so we're getting ready to finalize that, and it will be soon. I'm not going to commit to a number of weeks, but it will be soon when we'll actually have that information.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So another question is, we heard a lot of nice whining from high school principals before we committed to this about the per pupil allocation that was going to be taken from their budgets. And from what I've heard is the response has been very positive now once we've actually done it and they've seen what kind of impact it makes in their schools and the fact that they no longer have to have carts and things like that. So I just want to get a sense maybe from Martin or others about that.
Well, I'm still whining. No, I think that it's a cost. We understand we all have to share the costs, and I think that it's a reasonable thing to ask. I think the other piece is where we're going to start seeing it. I spend about $5,000 a month in paper. That's about what I have to budget. I would love to cut that down to $1,000 a month. And so as we get more into it, I think there are areas that we can also look to save money. Paper costs is an area. Also, just all kinds of different places that we can start to save and make up that deficit. So I think it's doable. I mean, once if you know what your budget is, you make that work.
I think that saved paper cost is definitely something that we're going to see. I know that I have made copies for maybe two school days this year because there's no need. And whereas last year I was making a lot more copies, and I know that paper cost sounds realistic to what we're spending at McLean. So I think over time we will definitely see a lot of saved paper cost.
Okay, great. And so to finish off, I'm just going to do some rapid fire questions. I can take these offline. For the MiFi devices, I do want to make sure that this is being communicated to all students, and I would just be grateful to hear from you how that is being communicated so everyone can take advantage of it that wants it. I'd like to hear more about, we heard from our friends at Johns Hopkins about the keyboarding issue and how keyboarding and coding are now integrated into the curriculum and at what levels they are getting those skills. In the Johns Hopkins presentation, I would like to see the year-to-year comparisons. I know there are a lot of things, but it'd be great to see graphs with last year versus this year, in addition to what you already have. And then finally, I would like a list of opt-outs based on school. I can imagine TJ is at the top of that list, but it'd be good to see countywide and if that mirrors our socioeconomic needs in the county. Thank you.
So who would like to respond to all those questions Mr. McElveen just posed?
We'll start with the MiFis.
So we've done a number of fan out. We do actiongrams, infograms out to our schools as a communication to make sure all of our school-based leaders are aware. We also have worked with county council PTAs. We've also done some communication with our parent liaisons. We're just recently talking about resending all of those information out as a reminder, because we have people that turn over and whatnot, and making sure people have that information. So they also, for our counseling staff, we've talked with Jen Glazer about getting some of that information out. So a lot of the folks that have the interaction with the students that might need it the most. So we'll continue to re-up that. We've done it before. We're going to continue to make that on an annual basis to get the word out. Keyboarding, you want to do keyboarding? We can definitely give you the school-by-school breakout of the opt-outs. And actually, we initially thought there were going to be a bunch of TJ, and initially I think there were 7, only 7 kids. So they want, and I think they're finding that they actually are very valuable, much more valuable than they expected. So again, they have a lot of those. We kept some of those fixed computer labs for their higher end needs at school, but we did not eliminate their scientific labs that have some higher end computers. But the one-to-one device, we actually have a video that one of the TJ kids did, which is excellent, about the day in the life of an FCPSOn computer. So once the information got out and people were using them, they realized that they were actually quite valuable. So.
And I did share that video with the boards.
Okay.
You had also asked about the year-to-year comparisons. That information is in the Johns Hopkins full narrative report online. If you look at it and you see something that's missing that you would like to have, let us know and we'll see if we can provide that. Keyboarding, it is integrated into our curriculum. There are other opportunities for students to develop those skills. And as we're building out our new and enhanced computer science curriculum, which is going to actually start, and we're piloting right now in preschool, right? I do think we need to think probably differently about keyboarding, and I think it's one of the areas that we need to collect more information from teachers and from parents and from students about how effective students are developing keyboarding skills with the current opportunities that they have, and if we need to do something different. So I do think it's an area that we need to continue to pay attention to.
I would just add, I was just asking the students here how they do it, and I have a 8th grader and a 9th grader, and I try to get them to do those, the old QWERTY thing that we used to do, and neither of them do it, and they're both as fast as I am. So I will say they put their fingers out on that board. I don't know how everything gets done, but it does get done, and it gets done pretty quick. So.
Yeah, so if I can just comment on that also. So I was in a private school until middle school, and in the elementary and middle schools, they were very, they did really want to push that typing, making sure we're using the standard rows and the layout of your fingers. And I struggled with that for many years, and I still don't have it right, but I kind of have my own typing style, and I can type very quickly. So I think it's something to encourage so that students aren't trying to type like this, because there's no way you can keep up with notes if you're trying to go like this. But I think that it's something also to consider to make sure we're not forcing students to use those home row layouts, because that might end up making them slower and less efficient.
Wonderful. I want to move on to Ms. Darren Kofax, followed by Ms. Keys-Gamara.
Well, we have been talking about this since I have been on the board, and it's been 8 years, and I know you've been probably talking about it prior to that, but I just want to say congratulations to staff who have done a thoughtful rollout. It has been, when Ms. Strauss alluded to it, through the years we had been reluctant to move forward because we had heard such stories of people who've done it unsuccessfully and what had happened in some large school systems. So I congratulate you for being where we are today. I know there's still some challenges, but I think when we talk about equity of access, we talk about having these devices for everyone who needs one, and the MiFi access, that's incredible to me. And I'm so thankful and grateful for all of you who've been able to get that done. A couple things quickly, because we don't have a lot of time. The MiFi numbers do seem low to me. So, and I appreciate what you just said. So,
Those were only high school. I just want to clarify that. Those were only the high school. And one of the things also to remember that you may have a younger child has checked it out, and they can, if a younger student has checked it out, you can have up to 5 devices. So it's not,
Okay.
you don't need one per student, you need one per 5.
One per 5 for family. Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that answer. Thank you. I do think, as a parent of a child who's recently graduated, and I saw some of the technology her high school was using at that 2 years ago, I know I was a little bit, I'm very different than you. You obviously are very data involved in your day-to-day work, but I think it's very important for parents to understand. So the more parental engagement we could get, because I am hearing a little bit of, what we're hearing today is that the differentiation is so important, and I've seen it in some of the schools that I've been visiting. It's amazing. And Martin, I have a question for you on that one. But I do think there's parents who are frightened that because they don't know how differentiation works, they're not sure what a Google Classroom looks like. So the more we can do for that, so if we could have scheduled next steps for, that would be a next step for me to ensure that there are, by high school pyramids, opportunities for parents to learn and grow. And while I'm on this, Martin, you had talked about, and this is, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you gave a very excellent example about, a science class and talking about the cell and how the different levels could be from all the way from high school down to a 5th grade level if need be. Can you just explain to us, so I can have better, if you will, explanations as I go out into the community about how that actually works? How does the teacher use technology to assess the levels that their students are at, and then put them in touch with the right programming on their devices?
Sure. So I think, IS, they didn't pay me for this. They have really done a great job of creating a lot of different resources. And so, and I want to keep this a tight answer. So go back, think about your collaborative teams planning. So your biology teams planning. Those teams have ESOL teachers on them. Those teams have special education teachers on them. Those teams have straight gen ed honors, and then, depending on different level, what science you're talking, or what content you're talking about, they also have AP level teachers. So as they're planning together and they're working around those essential standards, we're trying to find resources. We've done this for a long time. I mean, they just were worksheets. So the self-contained teacher might have a different looking worksheet than a co-taught situation where you have special education students and general education students, general education and honors. What is now occurring is, because of either research that they've done on their own, where they find their own readings and their own resources, or in the toolbox that IS has provided, they're able to then be able to give different, within the Google Classroom even, give different types of assignments, different types of readings, and different types of articles. There are some, like I use Newzilla for an example, that wouldn't be in the science classroom as much. But if you are, I'm struggling for a social studies example. If you're looking at constitutional democracy, I don't know, I just made something up. They're on that Newzilla. They do have different levels, and those reading levels, usually what they do is within class they'll assign several articles, and then the program itself will tell you this student is operating at this level versus this student, and then you can just mass assign. And that's just one example. The no red ink is another huge example of that. Again, you have a student who is getting ready and is writing at the collegiate level already. The no red ink works for that student just as well as it works for the student who is putting a comma on everything and no periods, or no commas and no periods. But again, it goes to the level. So it's amazing. It's customized learning is what it is. It's customized learning.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. Thank you so much for helping me better understand that.
Thank you, Ms. Darren at Kofax. I now have Ms. Keys-Gamara, followed by Mr. Wilson, then our student Kimberly, and Dahlia Palchuk.
Thank you guys for this presentation. I won't go over all the thanks that I've heard everybody else said. I'll just say ditto, because I don't want to use my time up. Okay, so I spent a great deal of my weekend talking to PTA leaders and parents and fielding some of their questions. So I'm going to try to address this from a little bit different background, different way, perhaps the back door. And my overall theme is who's left behind, or who those areas, those groups that we would be concerned about. So I will start with, for example, how does FCPSOn impact students who don't have English, who may be our ESL students? How are we able to address their needs better with this? And as a possible next step, is this, I'm thinking, and I hope I didn't miss this conversation when I stepped out, and I certainly came late due to a family obligation, but I would like to see that in the next step, because these are some of the populations that I'm going to go over now that we're concerned about. And while we may be hitting our core students that, you know, who knows what the typical FCPS student is today, but while we may be serving certain students, and we've heard wonderful testimony today, I'm concerned about our ESL students. I'm concerned about our students with disabilities. How are we differentiating those needs? Are we making sure that the support that they need, because we have introduced technology, is actually being met? And those would be two separate next steps as to how we're serving those populations and monitoring to make sure that we are addressing particular needs for those kids. As we look toward moving to middle school, I'm assuming the younger the child, there may be different needs for those children. For example, I know there are some kids that may need more of a tactile experience. They may do better holding a book as opposed to dealing with a device. How are we dealing with those types of needs as we start dealing with younger children? I had a parent come up to me and say, well, it looks like Dr. Brabrand spoke on this, and it sounds like this is just a train that's rolling, and this is what we're doing. And I want to make sure the community understands that we are in discussion. We certainly want to hear from them. I'm going to stop right now and give you an opportunity to respond so I don't lose all my time, so I can have a follow-up.
Great. So the first question you asked was, how is the initiative serving special populations like English language learners and students with disabilities? Dr. Morrison has some information in the program evaluation that speaks to that. When we look at the achievement gains that we're actually seeing in our classroom, in discussion with classroom teachers, feedback directly from teachers, they're actually seeing large gains for both of those populations. So they're seeing advantages of that differentiation actually happening for those students, and those students having more access and more opportunity and more success with the core curriculum. So that's something that we've documented and we do see in the program evaluation. Additionally, and there's a couple other people that want to jump in, so give me 1 second because that's great. Additionally, we know that we have to be really intentional about making sure that the students understand how to use the technology and have the supports to do that. So we've been very deliberate about that. So for example, for our English language learners at the high school level, in those strategies for success classes, a core component of the curriculum experience there is making sure that students know how to use and access the devices. And that's something that we're seeing is happening for our students with disabilities in their classrooms as well. So it's something that we've been very purposeful and very intentional about. And I want to make sure to let some other folks jump in. Margaret?
I just wanted to add that from my work at Chantilly and now at Westfield, we're seeing more students access their accommodations. Martin talked about this a little bit before. It might be a book that looks totally different, and that sets me apart. But when I can open a new tab or have something assigned to me in Google Classroom that looks the same as everyone else, as a middle schooler or a high schooler, I'm much more likely to use it when it doesn't set me apart. And so that is something we've continued to see from the get-go. It surprised everyone, and it's just been growing. The other piece I would say is that oftentimes we found students in, especially our newcomer programs, were not having access to these same sort of learning experiences. There may be fewer project-based or inquiry-based opportunities, and now those students have access where they didn't before. We worked with a level 1s and 2 ESOL students to do a project about who are the people in our building that we can get to, learning to email, learning to contact them, having conversations that wouldn't have been possible before this. And so not only accessing accommodations, but new kinds of learning that we didn't access before. So I just wanted to share those 2 little examples.
Everything she said, and so one of the things that I had on my notes, so like it gives kids the opportunity to go at the pace. So you may be very fluent reading and writing in whatever language that you came here in. And we do see a lot of students where they do struggle because, I mean, they are at the first grade level of learning our language. And so I think one of the things that this device does is a lot of our teachers and a lot of our ESOL teachers have gone to recording themselves, recording lessons. If you don't have the device to go home and learn at your pace, then it's not a wasted, it is a wasted opportunity, because what it's now allowing is students to go home and re-see or re-watch the same lesson 4 or 5 times, which they never would have had that opportunity before. I think that's really, truthfully, I think that's one of the strongest points that we've seen is the very differentiation that you're asking about.
So thank you, Martin and Margaret, for giving some real concrete examples. William?
Yeah, so if I may, I work in the tech office with our T-Specs and our S-Bits, and I have seen, you were asking about how we serve the different populations in FCPS. So I've seen purchase orders come in, purchase orders that we put in come for the laptops that we order for our general population, also come in a touchscreen option for students with learning disabilities or that need that physical touch or may not be able to use the keyboards. We've also ordered keyboards with bigger text and bigger keys, as well as mice for students who may not have that full function of their hands.
All right, awesome. So you had a second question, I think. So your second question was around when we're thinking about rolling out to younger grades like middle school, for example, what additional accommodations do we need to have in mind and think about in terms of the access and the use of the technology? And you mentioned the idea of, having students actually have opportunities to read textbooks, hold paper, right, be more tactile learners. And all of those things are true. And we can give you examples of what that looks like in our schools now, because remember, it's not just our Phase 1 schools that have access to that technology now, it's some non-Phase 1 schools that have access to that technology now. And very much, we want to make sure that teachers understand when to use the technology, when there's an educational benefit of using the technology, and making sure that students that need a different instructional approach and a different resource have that. So that's something that we're very intentional about, those media guidelines, those 9 media guidelines about balanced use of technology and the accompanying toolkit are resources that we put together for teachers to help them understand that and to make those decisions. And then when we purchase resources and materials, we have been very deliberate to make sure that we're not just purchasing just technology. There are a lot of benefits that we've all talked about in terms of the differentiation, the access, the equity around the technology. And sometimes students are going to learn better with a different technology, a book, a handout, whatever the case may be. So when we do our curriculum adoptions, we're always purchasing not just technology, but also hard copy resources, textbooks, classroom sets of books, and other materials and resources in different types of forms so that teachers have a wide variety and a balanced use of materials to use with their students.
So I'll use my last 28 seconds to talk about the thing that I always talk about, which is how best we communicate with our parents to make sure they understand what we're doing. I am hearing those questions out there, parents being basically afraid of what this will mean. What are we losing? What are we gaining? And so I know we do a lot of email kinds of things. I'd like for us to look at ways as a next step of better communicating with some of these communities. There are communities that do not email. And one of the things that the PTA leaders communicated with me is we need to figure out how to use text and perhaps what other ways we can. And I'll put everything else on the next stop because I see those double zeros there. But
thank you, Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Mr. Wilson, followed by Kimberly, followed by Ms. Palchuk.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. This is perfect following Ms. Keys-Gamarra because I am one of those parents who's has been in the process of the rollout with my student at Oakton High School. And I would concur that there is sort of a series of questions as a parent that you have in terms of how is this going to affect my child's experience at school? How is this going to affect the amount of learning that takes place and achievement? And are we putting resources to our best use? So that's really actually a good place for me to start because my own personal experience has been, as others have said, it's been a very smooth experience from my perspective. You know, my daughter, I guess because you know, she's grown up with technology, was able to immediately use her FCPS laptop with no difficulties. She didn't have any significant technological problems, making sure that she could connect and access her classroom resources online. So from that perspective, I think that's a credit to the rollout. I think that it's correct to say that it's been pretty smooth, at least from this parent's standpoint. I do feel, and I think Ms. Koufax mentioned this, that we've got. I do feel a little bit disconnected because you know, now that we've got the laptop. Now my older children that went through Oakton, they also had laptops. They brought their own devices. So in some ways it's not that much different, but I do feel a little more disconnected than I did before because, you know, I've got to go to her to log in and ask her, you know, how do I get into your class and look at things. And she's really good about telling me, but I think that parent engagement part is a really important piece of keeping the whole Fairfax County family, you know, connected to the classrooms. So I'm using almost all of my time here. I guess the first question, I'm going to need to go back. Well, my first question is, I loved the various questions that were answered and the responses. You know, as I read through them, they're almost uniformly describing success. I wonder whether someone could talk about what problems have occurred during this implementation so that I understand that you're actually being honest in your self-reflection about this process.
Well, I mean, I can start, and then I would definitely look to any of the folks on the panel to give me, from your perspective, the challenges that you've seen with the initiative and things that we might need to improve on. I guess I would say I do think in the program evaluation there are a number of recommendations of things that we need to look at. I'm not going to necessarily go back in terms of the slides, but one of the big things from where I sit in instructional services is the need for professional development and the amount of time that it takes for teachers to be able to be comfortable changing their practices. And that's one of the things that I think is a real challenge for us because we have limited professional development time with our staff. And we have limited professional developers that can work with our staff. And Margaret is certainly in that position as a professional developer in the SPITS role. And her time is really devoted to coaching, modeling, mentoring, supporting teachers in terms of making the kinds of instructional shifts that we want to see happen in terms of being able to actually fully utilize and optimize the use of the technology. So that's one of the biggest challenges, I would say, from my perspective. I think the other things that we've heard, that we've talked about a little bit here at this table today, is the continued need for a focus on digital citizenship and how important that is. And we're doing a lot of work in that area, but we know that that is a continuing area of focus and need. We still have too many issues of cyberbullying, too many students who might not understand how to protect their digital identity and develop a safe digital footprint, and that's a big area of need for us. The other one, from my perspective, is this idea of technology balance, and we talked about that a little bit with the guidelines and the toolkit that we put in place. But I think probably, you know, as a parent myself, who sets limits for my own children, a fourth grader and a seventh grader, on the amount of technology that they can use, that is something that our families are struggling with, right? So we need to continue to support them. And then I think the last piece that I've heard from several board members is the need for parent engagement and parent communication. And while we have done a lot and have tried a lot of different things, we've had regional meetings, the schools, I know have done a lot of site-based, school-based meetings. We've sent out a lot of communication, a lot of information. It's hard. Parents are busy, right? And it's hard to connect with them and make sure that all of the parents have access to the information and the questions that they have can be answered in a way that's going to work for them. So those are just some of the things that I would point to from my perspective, and then other panelists, if you want to engage on that as well.
So, this is, it's PD. I mean, the rollout itself has been very good. As I look and I hit my classrooms, and like I say, I look at teachers who I would expect it not to be involved as much with it. They've done it. Now, one of the things we did is we modeled Pear Deck for our teachers when our teachers came back. So we showed them. And one of the things, though, that we made sure that we talked to them about is this is a tool. This is a tool. Like lecture is a tool. Like grouping is a tool. So I think that is the piece of it. I would say that, and I think I speak for both associations, we need more time to PD with our teachers. And I think that piece of it, if we're going to go from, because here's where my fear would be. My fear would be is that when we get to a certain tipping point, that we will see a point where some teachers might be inclined to do the computer more. That's just a professional development thing. It really is a professional development. We're not there now, and I think that would be the biggest thing. And then the budget piece. But again, we'll have to adjust to the budget piece, and that from just the practitioner every day looking at your budget and going, it looked like this, now it looks like that. But it's an adjustment we make.
I think, speaking from a teacher's perspective as well, like professional development, yes, definitely. Also time, right? We're contracted at 194 days a year. 180 of those days we have students. So that's 14 days that we have to plan and implement and attend professional development and all of that. It will take time for things to happen because the professional development is important and it's been great and will continue to be great, but giving us time to really plan these things and look at them, a year out. Okay, I tried this year. How can I improve it next year? And then how can I really improve it in 2 years? The timing piece matters.
I feel like a great way to communicate with parents is during the issuing days when we're getting our laptops. During my day, I was setting up my stuff. Maybe you could have someone having a presentation in the background, letting them know what's it going to be used for, how to implement it in the classroom or at home, or maybe even YouTube video, the FCPS YouTube channel have a YouTube video that people can just watch and they can learn how is this going to be used, how it's going to help my child out. I feel like that'd be just a great convenient sources that won't have to expedite or be too much to inform parents.
I just want to say Hawk Pride.
That's right. Yeah.
Woo! I'd like to speak up as a parent here, right? And I want to be really careful. My son became an RA. His first week there, he was awoken at 4 a.m. from a parent calling him with the duty phone to make sure that he woke up for a test. So there's a line at which you need to guide and shepherd your children into adulthood and be engaged in that way. That may or may not be engaging in and viewing their Google Classroom, right? I think we have an opportunity here to understand that we need to let helicopter parents be less helicopterish and help students be more responsible and accountable for their learning and their path forward, right? So I think that this is an incredible opportunity, and I think there's definitely opportunities to engage parents, but helping them know more about what's happening on that paper or that assignment may or may not be the right choice for us.
So if I can just jump in here, I have a lot to say about this. So I'm going to try to keep it short. So one thing you mentioned is accountability, and I think that word is really important because what one-to-one has done has given people accountability. And I had asked a couple of my friends about, one-to-one in preparation for coming here. And the thing that I didn't expect, but one of the responses I got the most was that I'm able to hold my group members accountable for group projects. And I think that same accountability is evident in parents, right? Parents can hold their students accountable. No, the teacher didn't lose your paper. No, it didn't get crumpled up in your backpack. No, the dog didn't eat it. You know, you didn't do the work. But at the same time, if parents are down your throat about a big project, you might not have the time to chunk it out and say, you know, if I'm going to say I'm going to do a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit this day, where parents just see, oh, you have something due, get it done as soon as possible, you know, you're taking away from the student's ability to manage their own work. Yeah, being an adult, exactly. So,
Learning to be an adult.
also, I forgot who asked the question originally, but you mentioned something about the transition overall has been very smooth, but one of the major drawbacks, or maybe, I don't want to call it a failure, but somewhere where, yeah, a challenge, thank you, where we've need to improve is the infrastructure for the computers. So we have the computers, they're in the schools, but what do all the computers need? They need a connection to the internet. And I can't speak to other schools, but I can speak for Oakton. We don't have that. I mean, the other day I was in English trying to take a test on Pearson, and we did nothing the entire period because nobody could connect to the internet. And nobody could connect to the internet because we rolled out 3,000 computers without, you know, beefing up the infrastructure beforehand. So I think it's something to consider if we're going to roll them out to middle schools, that we need to increase that infrastructure before we roll out the computers. Another thing is the proactive blocking that we use for students. I personally think it's a very good way to make sure that students are accessing the resources that they need. But at the same time, I've had this situation where I need to access a website for work, but it's blocked because in high school we talk about a lot of hot button issues, and if I can't get the access to read articles about these hot button issues, how am I supposed to do my work, right? So I know it's a very complex system with many algorithms, but I think it's something that might need to be evaluated. Also, let's see, so you talked about, we have a lot of tools, right? This is a tool, this is a tool, this is a tool. Google Classroom, Blackboard, No Red Ink, all these different things. But I think we need to be thinking about how we're going to combine all of these things into a fluid experience, not only for students, but for teachers. Because a teacher can assign you a No Red Ink assignment, they can post something on Google Classroom, but how do we link these things together? And I think that also leads back to your thing of, you know, more, I mean, what everybody's really been saying, more professional development for the teachers. Which, okay. And my last thing, I know I'm going on a little long, but my last thing is for parents, I think somebody here said, you know, they set restrictions for their students on how long they may be on computers. I think a lot of parents might not have the technical ability to even know that there are parental controls available to them. So I think it's important, like everyone said, to educate parents. And I think that your idea of putting something on YouTube or making something accessible, maybe in an email blast to parents to make sure that they know that there are things that we can do for students. And on the laptops themselves, one feature that I find extremely helpful, and my suggestion to the board would be to leave it available, is the night shift or night mode, where we can actually decrease the amount of blue light coming off the computers. Because I know when I'm working on an assignment at 11 o'clock at night, it's not the greatest thing to have like this bright blue light in my eyes. So yeah, that's all for me. Thank you.
Wow.
One quick thing on that.
Cougar
You
pride
did a
on
great
that,
job.
for sure.
Sloan, I just want to just mention one thing about Oakton, and they're in the middle of renovation, so some of the parts of the building are having some challenges with connectivity, so we'll continue to work with that, and continue to look at that. So make sure when you have those challenges that you guys put in, have your teachers put in tickets so that we can make sure we can see which parts of the building, because we have done some additional upgrades over there in the last few weeks, but I know they're in the middle of renovation, so sometimes they're in this part of the building, then that part of the building. So not an excuse, but just make sure we can continue to help make sure you are having the access that you need. And also, your teacher can request a particular site being unblocked temporarily if you have it for a particular assignment.
Mr. Wilson, you have 7 seconds.
Well, first of all, thank you both for great input. I'm going to save, I have a bunch of other questions, but I'll save them for go back.
All right, on deck, before we go to Kimberly, because it was been raised multiple times, I really think it's important, Ms. Loveglass, that you just give a very brief primer about how FCPS is being a national leader on the walled garden with Google security. I think that's essential.
Yeah, we've had some questions from parents that wanting to know why we're just using Google in general, but basically FCPS a number of years ago worked with Google themselves to build an education version of Google Drive and whatnot. And so we actually have our Google implementation is implemented in a secure way so that students have access to collaborate with each other, but not outside of FCPS. And so we have something that's called a walled garden, which allows additional security for the use of Google Classroom and Google Docs and the G Suite application that adds additional protection than just using Google Docs and whatnot outside in the public. So we've implemented that. And we've had a lot of other school divisions that have come to us about how they've implemented that.
But just to clarify for layman's terms, and especially our parents, as I understand it, what it means is our students' privacy is protected. So it's not being the
Right.
use of Google is not going to impact our students' privacy. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, sure. In addition, so Google Classroom is free. However, even though it's free, we have implemented a contract with Google, so that adds a lot of that data protection language, and that also is something that has been shared with other school districts, so that we actually have a contract that they are contractually required to protect our student information, to protect our data within FCPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Kimberly, our student, and then we have Ms. Palchuk, Ms. Schultz, and Ms. Evans. I put you on the list.
First and foremost, I'd just like to thank everyone who came and presented today, especially the students, Stefan and William. And I just wanted to personally say that I have almost all positive views about the initiative. I attend a e-learning backpack school. I attend Lee High School. So I could go on and on about how much I like it, what the benefits are, but that we all know those benefits. So I actually have like 2 questions, but I'm gonna split them up just for separation purposes. And my first question is, as a student, I've had these concerns. What are we doing specifically? We talked about this for the, hold on, give me a second. Let me just check real quick. It was the media balance and wellness in the classroom. How are we specifically ensuring that the technology does not affect the mental wellness of our students? Like, we can all see how the youth is affected by unnecessary phone use, but what about laptops? What are we making sure that these aren't kind of bleeding into the lives of our students too much?
So I can answer that a little bit, and then if anybody else on the panel wants to weigh in, please do. So those 9 guidelines that I mentioned have accompanying resources and materials for teachers to use with students to have and facilitate those kinds of discussions about how frequently do you use technology, for what purposes do you use technology, in what ways do you use it, what impact, positive and negative, does it have on you, emotionally, psychologically, right, academically. So we've built out a lot of resources this year for teachers to use with their students, and we're in the process of building out an accompanying set of resources or toolkits for parents to use with their students as well. We do have a fair amount of information already posted online on our digital citizenship website that gets at some of these issues, but we're continuing to build that out with more resources and more opportunities. We've hosted a number, like I said, in partnership with schools, a number of parent nights for parents to come in and learn about the resources that we have, learn about some of the potential risks of students overexposure to technology, and we've provided a lot of those materials and resources to schools to host those events themselves. So our schools are all in different places, but I think we have a pretty good set of baseline resources that can be used. But some schools have done a lot of work, like Martin suggested at Hayfield, where they've actually earned the Common Sense Media recognition for dealing with these issues and supporting parents and students with these issues. So Stefan, did you have something on that?
No, I completely agree. Like, we should have like a conversation about it and like discuss like healthy ways to use your laptop, and like maybe I was thinking like time like the certain dates, subjects, or assignments you do at a certain time, like you do it at that time, and then you can be done for the day. And like we were discussing about how like we don't even use our laptops for like personal use. So like maybe like the blocking out the websites and that stuff's good for us because like you can't like get distracted or get lost in it because you're only like focused on your assignments and getting that done. So if like those sources help us to like stay focused and then get off our laptop, so we don't have to be like addicted or drawn into it more than we actually need to or excessively.
I'd also add that as part of the professional learning that we've done both with the school teams and back at school, we talk about how do we choose the best tool for the job. We heard in the Hopkins report the smarter use. That's really what this is. When do we decide that it's best to use chart papers and markers, and there's a reason for that? And when am I making the instructional decision that something is added by using Google Slides or Google Drawing that we can collaborate on in a different way? We spend a lot of time in conversation with school teams as we're planning together, as we're engaging in these professional learning experiences, talking about what is the best tool. I always say over and over that I'm a technology specialist, and yet sometimes the best tool is paper. It is a traditional way to do it because we have to decide what is the best for the job, and that job is learning.
Fantastic. Kimberly, you had another question?
So Ms. Keys-Gamar kind of touched on this earlier, and I also wanted to just touch on it on a more general scope. So while we're opening up options with the computer usage and making sure that these options, how do we make sure that students, like for example, I personally like to write certain things down. Like as you see, I'm using both my notepad and my computer. How are we making sure that teachers are giving students these opportunities to choose which one is more basically geared towards them, making sure that it's not narrowing the options rather than opening it, making sure that if I want to have, say like this paper copy, I have access to it.
These are also conversations in our professional learning that we engage in all the time. We want student choice to be at the center of our work. It is, you see, here I am with a notebook as well, because it matters, and it's the way I doodle and keep my brain engaged. And so we want our students to have those experiences so they can choose what's best for them. There may be times when you're forced to try something to see if it works for you. And then later on, it's scaffolded to release and give you the choice later on. So professional learning, I think, is another avenue where we do that when we're planning with collaborative teams, when we're working with teachers, when the SBITS is coaching teachers as we're planning together. Do you want to join in?
Yeah. I would echo professional development, and also just teachers. I know that with FCPSOn, and I think a lot of schools have been reading the book Cultures of Thinking, but one of my big focuses has been focusing on learning over work. And really emphasizing learning as the goal as opposed to work and a list of tasks. And that's something that I'm going to get better at, and I know that teachers will get better at. And so if teachers, through professional development, are supported to have learning as the end goal, then it doesn't matter how you get there, right? How students get to the outcome, whether that's writing and doodling something in the margins, whether it's using a digital graphic organizer that I've created that I thought would be helpful. Students can take different paths to get to the learning if the learning is the goal.
Yeah, and the reason why I think education in particular is such a difficult institution to see change is because it is filled with people that were very successful in the old model. I mean, there's no other profession like that. And I think it goes back to culture, and it goes back to what your teachers believe and what your students believe. And I think it is always a risk. There is always a risk in anything that we do. I think what we do, and I think you bring up two really good points, is we anticipate those risks and we plan ahead of them. And so I'm going to just beat that PD drum again. I'm not talking about training. I'm talking about professional development. And I think that professional development, and the reason why this has gone so well is because I think there's been some good stuff.
I just wanted to ask this for everyone else who may not know, you guys have been saying it a lot. What does PD mean?
Oh, you know what? Sometimes I go to military stuff and they use acronyms and I don't understand a word they're saying. Professional development. So today is Professional Development Day. So there's teacher work days where teachers come and they can grade and they can do what they need to do to prepare for, their lessons. And there are days that we're actually doing what they do with you. We're trying to teach them some new opportunities or new ways to do things. Sorry about that.
Can I just answer your question also? From a student perspective, I think that, kind of two parts to my answer. I think that change is scary. And I think that if people don't want to change, then they won't. But I think that it's at least our responsibility in the implementation of FCPSOn that we encourage both students and teachers to move in the direction of using these computers. Because if we just say, okay, here we've spent whatever the budget was, $19 million on laptops, here's your laptop, but we're not going to just do whatever you want with it, then we're not going to get to where we want to be. But I think if we encourage students to use the laptop, say, just try it. Try the laptop. If you like it, you can use it. If not, use it in part and use your notebook in addition. So I think there's a balance to that. But then also, we talk a lot about PD for teachers, for administrators, but what about students? Like, we talk about this development for teachers and administrators on how to do all these things, but some students that might not even know like how to use Google Docs, how to format text, how to do all these things, how to use keyboard shortcuts. I think that it's important that we consider students when we're talking about professional development, because I think it's a thing that students need also.
I guess I'm just going to use the last of my minute, just kind of echo my support of the one-to-one initiative. So I personally do a lot of my personal learning outside of class. And it's one of those things, like the bones of the curriculum is in the classroom, but I feel as if the meat of the instruction comes outside of it, personally for me at least. And being able to take my work from the classroom and just transfer it immediately back home has been very helpful for me. And I'm sure we've all heard like the little saying, like you can't assess a fish's talent based on their ability to climb a tree. And I think that kind of showcases the benefits of this, because instead of I learning very different things, I like using Quizlet, and by having it directly in front of me, it's really helpful, and I've been able to use it a lot more with the use of more computers. And coming from a school in freshman year not being able to have it, and from this year, I really think it's been a very successful rollout.
Well said, Kimberly. Thank you. All right, I have Ms. Palchuk, Ms. Schultz, Ms. Evans, then Mr. Moon and I will take a turn, then we will have two go-backs, then we have next steps. I just want you all to know that we originally said we needed 3 hours, and we also suggested breaking this up. So it's going to be tough to do this within the 2.5 hours. We're not going to get there, I'll tell you that. So, but we're going to need to just do the very best we can on such an important topic.
Thank you. Well, I will try to be brief. I've been trying to hold back a little bit of my excitement, and I'll try to share that and then share my kind of questions for next steps. First of all, I just want to thank you, Dr. Presidio and Ms. Loveglass, for bringing together. From my memory, this is the first time we've had parents, students, teachers, principals, administrators, and researchers at the table sharing this. So I just want to thank you all so much for being here, because I think it makes this conversation and the questions, especially hearing our students, so much more insightful. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. So a couple of things. First of all, for the research, I really appreciate that it was mixed methods research. It's the best way to do it, and it's just helpful to have not just surveys, but those focus groups, a more in-depth understanding, which I learned in grad school. You get totally different point of view by doing that, so I appreciate that. Second of all, I want to say I think we all know this is not a panacea. There is no panacea in education, except maybe the best teachers. But we all know this isn't going to teach our kids, but it's another piece of technology, just like pencils, pens, and even your cell phone. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness in moving forward. I know originally, having come as a teacher who, outside of our system, first taught in a one-to-one school and then moved to a BYOB school, I was so frustrated with the lack of infrastructure of support. Even being able to know that the computers, the laptops were going to be charged when we needed them, that was probably the most frustrating part. And so I know while there were a lot of reservations, and I appreciate that we were so thoughtful in professional development and training and having the right equipment, the best equipment, you know, even as a student, I was at one of those schools that got technology early on from ExxonMobil due to an oil spill, and I knew that the teachers had done a great job. So I knew we'd get there. I know I appreciate that we did take the time to make sure that it was rolled out appropriately and that it looks like our principals are ready for the next step, so I hope we're ready for the next step. And even to the point, I know as a teacher, knowing that this device, and I love Quizlet in language teaching, not only when you're trained and have the tools gives you the ability to focus on the learning, but I know for me in a classroom with language levels at all across the spectrum, you know, needed deep differentiation, that having the right tools from having not just teacher but students record themselves, I think that is so powerful to giving them those opportunities, especially ones who don't speak up in class, to really be working on that and perfecting their work and creating videos and really putting that life skill that we are creating adults, right? I don't know any adult in this room who does not use a laptop to do their work. So I just appreciate that we're doing that. And finally, I heard from a principal recently in a different district whose parents come to her saying, my kid is using this device, help, it's your job to teach them how to use it appropriately. They don't have that. They don't have the training. They're not using the common sense media. And so whether or not we want to be the ones responsible for this, and it is collaborative, it is with parents, a lot of that it is, you know, school system, we're teaching a lot of life skills. And so I do think this is appropriate that we are taking more of that onus on the development. A couple of my questions, time's up. Bandwidth, I know was brought up. I heard some teacher concerns, so if you can just speak to that as well as we roll out the bandwidth questions. And for professional development, I heard about students and choice. I guess my question would be, one, what our next steps are and where there's choice for teachers in professional development. And the other one, I recently heard wonderful feedback on a full staff, full school professional development in other areas. So I don't know if we've considered or if it would be helpful to have times, I know they're limited when we feel our teachers are there, to look at all of our staff, our parent liaisons, you know, everyone working in our buildings, being able to feel more comfortable and understand and have that development together. So thank you.
Any responses at all to Ms.
I can tell you the bandwidth. We did a significant bandwidth upgrade over this past summer, so that's made a big impact. We also did some additional things that you may have heard, that we've blocked Netflix, so we've now blocked Hulu, which is actually has made a significant help with our bandwidth. It's not necessarily popular with all of our customers, but we're continuing. You know, bandwidth is a continual evaluation process, and it is. We talked about sometimes it's specifically in the specific location, and sometimes it's, you know, it can be school-wide. So that's why we really encourage our folks to let us know as much information and to don't suffer in silence, and let us know when you're having a specific issue so that we can check it out. So we do go out there. We have detectors and whatnot to see where a particular issue is, but we have done some additional upgrades over this past summer, and we'll continue to do that.
I hesitate to say this only because I believe in being jinxed, but you know, I checked with Stefan. We really have not seen issues with bandwidth at Hayfield. So of course we will be shut down tomorrow.
And I can speak to the second question regarding full staff professional development. So one of the areas in which we were able to provide that and we shared with the board was around our equity work. And I know it's a model that we definitely want to continue to provide. I guess our challenge is time and when everyone is available to do that within our current structure a PD, but it is a definite model that we're hearing from all stakeholder groups in the county and all employees and I can see where this particular topic could very much so, everyone could benefit from. So it's something for us definitely to consider for the future.
And to address the question of choice for professional learning, what we've seen a lot of high schools do, and middle schools as well, is really consider what are the needs of our staff and how do we work together to do that. So a model that has been working in a lot of schools is an opening session with everyone together, and then breaking off into choice sessions in smaller groups. So we're not doing it with 150 people in the cafeteria. We're actually breaking up into classrooms and learning from teachers who are the experts in that area.
I love it. Thank you.
Great. I have Ms. Evans followed by Ms. Schultz.
Oh, thank you very much, and I apologize for missing the presentation. I had a family issue I needed to deal with, but I did thoroughly read the presentation and very much appreciate all the work that went into it. And I think this is excellent work. So congratulations for giving us this perspective, and as others have said, providing it from a variety of different viewpoints too. A couple of comments and then a couple of questions. I certainly agree with those that have talked about the mental health issue, that we need to be very cognizant of that from the start. I had a meeting with my PTA presidents just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and several of those were saying to us that this is something we really need to be cognizant of not having our students on their laptops all the time. And so I appreciate the conversation about that and cyber responsibility, and whether we have enough in, for example, our health education units about cyber responsibility and some of the downsides of too much use both of our phones and of our laptops. So that's one comment. I'm thrilled to hear that one of our students is well aware of the blue light and the need to turn off the blue light and do night shift. I've done that on my phone. I haven't actually thought to do it on my laptop, but I should. So I'm delighted to hear that you're aware of that and how that affects sleep, that the blue light reignites the brain to make you think it's daytime again. So we need to be sure that our students are aware of that if they haven't been fully apprised of that. Another thing that was brought up by the PTA presidents yesterday was a concern that the students often find it easy to get around the limits, the sites that, and perhaps I've only got 48 seconds, so I'm going to get all my questions out here. But I would like for someone to address that issue. Another question is on connectivity. Falls Church High School, as we know, has had issues in I mean, they were a backpack school, but I would be interested to know if there have been significant concerns there, because they haven't even started their renovation. And so that school, that's the last one to be of our high schools to be renovated. So if they're having particular issues over there. MiFi, again, the PTA presidents weren't even aware of it. I told them I would give them some information on it. I see that we have 252 MiFi taken out by high school students, but I would be interested in knowing how many there were total taken out. And I see my time's up, so I'd ask for a go back.
So go ahead and please respond to Ms. Evans' questions if you can.
Sure. So getting around the filters, we've done some upgrades in that. We actually implemented a new filtering system recently, and we've also blocked proxy servers, which was an area that a lot of the students were getting around some of our filters. So that was an issue more of last year. I'd be interested to hear from our kids to see if they've had as much. I think that it's a lot more restrictive now than it used to be. One of the things, though, however, is one of the things that we cannot block is cellular. So those are private cellular companies. So when kids come in with their cell phones, again, we really are pushing the lack, the no cell phone use during the classroom time, because they could have their personal cell phone, turn on their personal hotspot, and now they're into anything they want. Just like that can be at home as well. We have no control over that. But reducing the amount of cell phone time and the use in the classrooms will help with that issue as well. And so again, and also encouraging our parents not to give their students unlimited cell plans, because then they don't have the time and the plan to be able to use those cellular capabilities. In terms of I have not heard of recent issues of connectivity at Falls Church, but if you're having specifically, please let us know. But I have not heard any issues this year in Falls Church. As I said, we did a significant upgrade over the summer, so as I've told others, don't suffer in silence. If you hear of a problem, make sure you let us know. We'll be happy to check it out right away.
Yes, sure. So you mentioned something about it being easy to get around the limits. Respectfully, I would like to somewhat disagree with that. I think that it's not really that easy. We did have some issues last year, but they've since been resolved. One of the very specific issues was that the computers that were issued were able to have their own wireless hotspots that you could connect your phone to the computer, and that would bypass any network restrictions, but that was disabled recently, so that doesn't work anymore. Also, the process for unblocking a website is, from what I understand, fairly lengthy. Like, it has to go to the principal for approval, then it goes to the county. So it's not something where people are just unblocking websites willy-nilly, or the restrictions that we've put in place are actually quite effective. I haven't really seen any students able to bypass them except for VPNs. And like you said, proxy servers and VPNs have since been disabled. The only thing I would caution is putting too many restrictions might restrict features that people actually use. So I think it's finding the balance between making sure everybody is staying on task and also making sure that they have the ability to customize their devices in a way that works best for them.
Well, this may be old information then, so I'm glad to hear that that may have been corrected. And then on the issue of the MiFi and the numbers, I don't know if you have that.
We can get you the details of non-high schools. And it goes up and down. And one of the things I mentioned earlier, I think before you got here, is that we may have some students. Not every student needs to have one. You only need one per family that doesn't have access, because you can use up to 5 devices on one MiFi. So you don't need as many MiFis as you do students that need connectivity.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Ms. Benedicto, I know you're working on another project. Wanted to make sure you heard that next step about the number of MiFis that have been issued for Fairfax County students. MiFis being, yep.
K-12, not just, we had given high schools what they want, all schools. K-12.
Wonderful. Okay, I have Ms. Schultz, followed by Mr. Moon and myself, and then I have 3 go-backs, and this was supposed to conclude in 7 minutes, so we'll just, again, soldier on, do the best we can, but we've got to have a hard stop no later than 1:30 because the board needs to go into closed session.
Okay. And I, too, I'm sorry I missed this. It is a holiday, and I'm the only board member that has an elementary age child. So I was home doing, I don't know, things like monitoring screen time for the day. So I do have some concerns. We've heard just in the last couple minutes how there's a new filtering system put in, but there's been the backpack schools and the pilot program for years now. And I've been probably, an early flag waver about things like security. And just last month, Google was fined $170 million for violating not just privacy of individuals, but specifically privacy of children. And so the notion that we're having to write extra agreements in order to get Google to protect children for a product that's free. First of all, there's a reason that it's free, because they're collecting data. So I would like to hear a little bit about that. And I am concerned, and I'm glad the students have brought it up, specifically about the mental health aspects of being online, and whether that's on the phone or on the laptops. And I had previously brought forward that in the Northeast region, the CDC rates for suicide in a single generation of K-12 have increased 346%. 346%. That's one K-12 18 years ago to now. There was a Vanderbilt study that just came out that child suicide rates and suicide diagnoses are exponentially higher during the school year than in the summer. And in the time between 2008 and 2015, it's more than doubled. The thing that kids are doing more is being on screens. And I brought digital citizenship to you guys, I think maybe 6 years ago, and begged for it to be incorporated into the curriculum, and it's excellent. And I don't know what our rates are, and that's something I'm not entirely sure that we can discuss now, but the mental health aspect of having kids online, when I do the student town halls, one of the things that I've heard, and this is from the students themselves, is an increased propensity to cheat with the increased access to technology. So I'd like a little conversation on that. And then finally, at least at the front end, I have concerns about the navigation of all these different sites with the notion that Google accounts are proprietary for student data, and parents are not supposed to have access to them because it's student proprietary data. And what does that mean, especially for children who have executive function issues and may need additional help from parents and adults? So if somebody could comment on some of that, I would greatly appreciate it.
I can cover a couple of them. We have had filtering in FCPS since 2000. So we've had it for a long, long time, and it was followed as part of the Children's Internet Protection Act. And so, and the filtering systems have continued to evolve over the years. So they've gotten better and better. We have to keep trying to stay at one step ahead. I mean, these proxy servers and VPN types of things are relatively new, so it is something that we have to constantly monitor and constantly evaluate. We recently did an RFP for our content filtering systems, and we bought a new one, and we got implemented a new one that has more features than the last one. So we've had filtering for really the whole time we've had, certainly student devices, and certainly one-to-one devices. But every year it gets better. And we'll probably have something else better next time. And staying one step ahead of those that want to do harm, of course, is something that we have to keep on top of. So security is important to us just as it is to you. I promise you that. In terms of the Google accounts, as you indicated, it's a free service. They do not offer parent accounts for the Google Classroom. One thing that we hadn't mentioned is we've just recently finished an RFP for a new learning management system. And we've selected Schoology. I think we had it in a Braeburn briefing that we talked about the new contract. So we haven't implemented that yet. That will basically be replacing Google Classroom and Blackboard. And one of the nice things about it is it does have parent access. We have parent access now to Blackboard, but not to Google Classroom because it doesn't exist. We'd open it if we had it. And so the new Schoology actually integrates those features together into a learning management system that it does allow parent access. It doesn't allow parent access to other students' information, but to your students' information. So it's got a lot of new features. It's implemented by a number of districts, including Baltimore, some of the other districts that we do a lot of collaboration with, Virginia Beach, et cetera. So we're really excited about that. We're going to be piloting it next year. It takes a long time to implement a massive new system, but that's got some new features, and especially for parent access, which we're real excited about.
So I'd love to offer the student perspective.
I should say that he was on the, William was on our selection advisory committee for that application, so he can probably speak to that as well.
Yeah, so I was there for the LMS presentations as well, and I think that it's Google Classroom right now, as it is probably, like you said, not the best solution. Like you said, there are no parent accounts, but the new LMS, from what I saw, seemed very interesting. The only thing I would say is that we want parents to be involved, but like you mentioned earlier, we don't want them to be over-involved. So I think having that connection is important, but if teachers are being constantly bogged down with emails from parents, they're not going to be able to do their jobs and teach students effectively. I wanted to address a couple other things you said. You mentioned suicide rates in this country and how they've been raising in recent times. And I personally, as a student, I think that I would attribute that more to the constant pressure that we face in school rather than the devices. I think that it's due to pressure from parents, from peers, especially at schools that are known for having very high achieving students like TJ, Oakton, Madison, pretty much all of the schools in Fairfax County. And I think that as that pressure increases, students are having a hard time dealing with it. I wouldn't necessarily attribute that to our devices. I think it's easy to kind of use the devices as a scapegoat to blame these issues on, look, this is technology, it's new, it's up and coming, let's blame it on that. But I think really it's another issue that needs to be addressed separately from one-to-one. And I think unless I'm misunderstanding, the goal of this meeting is to decide whether to implement one-to-one in middle schools, correct? Yes? Okay. So I think that it's important for us to separate students' mental health from FCPSOn or one-to-one, because I know, and pretty much everybody else I know, we don't use our school computers for personal things. We use our school computers for school, and when we go home, we do what we do at home. But I personally have never seen anyone use their school computer for personal things. Now, that being said, my friends are probably going to hate me for this, but I think we need more digital citizenship. I think it needs to be pushed more. It needs to be this is our digital citizenship lesson plan, and this is how we're going to do it. Because we may have the certification, and we may have done stuff already, but I think we need more of it, and we need a lot more of it. Because if we want to talk about what students are doing on their computers, we can implement group policy on devices that we control. For those of you who don't know, group policy is like to restrict what students can do on their laptops. But we can't implement those policies on devices that don't belong to FCPS. And the way we can do that is through digital citizenship. So I think it's really important that we do more digital citizenship lessons, and we really drive that point home.
So I honestly thought you were going to start off with Research 101, which you kind of did, which is correlation does not equal causation, big theme that we all learn early on. But a quick Google search, because I have a device and can access information. So yes, there is an increase in suicide rates among the youth, but outside experts suggest part of the reason rates started increasing was because of better surveillance and reporting. It also says we're treating youth depressions less aggressively than we were back in the 1990s, and so far no one is saying that we have any idea what is driving this shift. So I would encourage, if there is, I'm not a mental health expert, my expert is in education, but whenever research is brought up, I do feel the need to explain.
Yeah. Like another thing about the citizenship, I think like it should go like hand in hand with the SR&Rs, like things like that. Like whenever you have to like read or like learn our rights as a student, like I feel like it should just be like the same thing. Like talk about the computers, like it's like just like do it at the same time, make it more convenient, and like explain to the student like this is what you can do online. Don't do this online, stuff like that. Like that'd just be like a simple solution to the problem.
From a teacher perspective, so you brought up mental health and cheating, which are both really important things that I think need to be part of this discussion. And I see FCPSOn as being a way to help improve problems associated with both of those things. First of all, with regards to mental health, so as William said, sometimes students, there was an article in the Washington Post about this too, adding students from high achieving schools to this list of now at-risk students because they feel so much pressure. And I have done a lot of introspection about my own role in that as a teacher of how much I'm asking students to do at home. And I think that sometimes teachers ask students to complete an amount of work at home that they would never ask other adults to complete at home. Because I go home, I have a daughter, I have a life and things to do, and our kids go home and they play sports, they have jobs, they have families and friends. And I see FCPSOn as being a way to help keep us from assigning that much work for them to do at home, because it allows us to personalize students' learning in our classrooms. So for example, I teach US history. I have students in my U.S. history class that have gone to Fairfax County Public Schools since kindergarten and have learned about U.S. history every single year. I have students that got to this country a month ago and have never learned U.S. history. And by having the devices, I'm able to tailor a different learning experience to those different students in the classroom, which ultimately means less work that they're doing at home and less pressure that they're feeling. And then as far as cheating goes, definitely a concern. But I think that the computers are allowing us to have more meaningful assessment and more assessment that's focused on skills rather than like rote memorization of content, and students are able to self-assess. And teachers are being provided professional development to really think about our practices and changing our practices with assessment that will ultimately reduce cheating at the end of the day. So they're both really important concerns, but I think that FCPSOn can help address them.
I just want to add one thing really quick. I just want to build off something you said, having less work at home. And what I've talked to people about is that one-to-one is actually decreasing the amount of work we have to do at home, not only because of the way we assign work, but something that I wasn't really considering is the one-to-one or FCPSOn is making us more efficient as students. So I can use the time in Cougar time in my open periods better, more efficiently, so that I have less work to do at the end of the day when I get home. So really having a reliable device to do that work and to be more efficient enables me to do less work at the end of the day.
I'll say this for Stefan, who just stepped out for a second. The other thing that is allowing is for our athletes. Most high schools, roughly a third of your school is participates in athletics. What we're seeing is a lot of students actually being able to do homework while they're on the bus. My daughter is managing the field hockey team. She's an 8th grader. She does not play. Follow the rules. She does not play, but she's experiencing that high school schedule now. I got to tell you, as a former coach, former athletic director, former athlete, I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. Like just watching between practices and going to away games and all of that. If you go in our lobby at 6 o'clock at night, you'll see a bunch of kids waiting to get picked up from after practice or whatever. And almost every one of them, they're out and they're working on it. So I do think, again, it's a tool. And any tool can be used for good, and every tool can be used for not good. And I think that goes back again to incumbent on us. The last thing I'll say, because I know we're going late, my son is taking online PE this year. And I'm going to kill him because he's not doing it as well as I think he should be. But he's finally started to figure that out, though. And I'm really excited to see how he used his SOAR, whatever West Potomac has, their time, to turn in his online PE work so that I wasn't on him on Saturday. So I think it can go both ways. And I think, but it does need to be intentionally taught. And I think whoever mentioned about the PD for the students, I think it was one of our students, I think that's a great point. I mean, that really clicked for me, that we got to be more intentional about how we're teaching the skills now that they have the tools.
Yeah, as a parent, I'd like to kind of weigh in on the whole mental health thing, right? It's great for the support, but it's kind of my job. And, part of that is, I've made the choice to give my kid one of those cell phones, right? It's also my responsibility to help them understand how that fits in their life and how it doesn't fit. Just like the laptop, just like friends, just like reading a book. You can read too many of those too, right? It's all about balance. And part of that is, knowing when to say no and understand what the consequences are, right? Some of those consequences are good. Sometimes you just need, and as a grown-up, right? Sometimes C is all you need. You don't always need an A, but I don't hear parents talk about that, right? I tell my kid that, I really, really, really would love for her to come home with an F because she's never gotten less than 100. That's insane. So I'm working in other directions for that very reason. And it's my job as a parent to engage at that level.
Okay, I have Mr. Moon and myself, and then we're going to go to quick go backs. I've got 4 people who said they need a quick go back.
I think as a meeting manager, I get 5 minutes rather than 3 minutes, right? Correct? So with that said, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here and participating in presenting and having conversation with us. Especially kudos to two students. I bet that we did pick two of the best, but you guys were so eloquent, knowledgeable, and contributing so much to our important discussion today. Make me proud to be a school board member working for you, and thank you. And many of my questions have been already asked and answered, so I'm going to focus on just a couple of areas. First of all, to Mary Beth, infrastructure support. I mean, from time to time, we have foreign visitors, coming to United States, visiting FCPS, and let us know that our Wi-Fi seems to be slower than theirs. And so do you think our Wi-Fi support is at an optimal level at this point? If not, what can we do?
Well, when you have visitors, they're coming in and they're part of our BYOD portion of our network, which has lower, we segment our bandwidth, and the BYOD has less priority than our FCPS students and teachers. So that's why your visitors are going to have a lower speed than others. That's intentional. We could have, we could spend lots and lots more money if we wanted to do, expand all of our networks, but I think we try to balance the expenditures with the need for it, and part of the way we do that is by segmenting the network about prioritization.
I wonder whether we have ever asked our users about our Wi-Fi speed and whether their response has been as positive as their response to some other questions that were included. Does anybody know?
I don't know if we specifically surveyed our schools, but we do hear when there's a problem.
I suggest next time when you do a survey, include that question.
Oh, and I don't know if that was part of our Johns Hopkins evaluation. I don't know about that. I don't think they included it, but maybe with our next round of evaluations that were coming, that's something we could probably add in. Sure.
Okay, thank you. The next question that I have goes to the middle school expansion. I was happy to support high school, and when the board voted to support that, if I'm not mistaken, we were thinking that we're going to wait until we do get a full evaluation of high school implementation before they expand it to middle school. Thus far, we seem to be getting a very positive response, reaction. And also, I don't know whether all the middle school principals have already left or still in the back. They seem to be supporting it. But looking at the budgetary implications, if someone could educate me on what we are losing by expanding to our middle school in terms of, I see a couple of line items such as repurposing textbook allocation money and also replacement equipment. It's just to give us some concrete examples of what they mean, what we are losing to support this if we want this model.
I can speak to the replacement equipment budget. So basically, currently we have not enough replacement equipment. That's why we have a lot of old technology. But the reason we're moving this is just an existing funding pocket, if you will, of funds in terms of what we currently spend to replace other equipment. We would not need to be replacing the existing like mobile carts and those kind of things because we're going to go with the one-to-one. And our lease process, Ms. Burden talked about, these are all going to be leased computers. They have a built-in every 4-year refresh, so I don't need to be replacing the 10-year-old machines because I'm going to have an automatic refresh every 4 years. That's something we didn't have in the phase 1 that we do now have with the high schools, and now we plan for the middle school. So it's built-in refresh. So that's why we're repurposing that REOC, which is refresh funding. That's the one piece I can talk to. In terms of the textbooks for people.
So, for us, we look at when we get our, our allotment. I think that what we have to do is we buy what we need, and we ask our teachers to give us what they need, and we buy what we need. I think there's always a budgeted item. It's what you want and what you need. And sometimes I know myself personally, I confuse the two. And sometimes I think what I want is what I need. But I do feel like, again, because this is the first year, I do believe that we are going to see, and we have even seen a reduction. I think I misquoted. I think it was $4,000 a month that we spend on paper. I think I said 5, so I just want to make that correction. But we have seen actually use of less paper. So when you look at the costs and all of that, I do think we're going to be 1, 2, 3 years down the road before we're going to see the complete, because we still do. I mean, I still go by the copy machines right in the main office, and I feel like opening the door and yell, stop, because you see. But as we see more of it, I will say this too, though. I'm seeing a lot more middle school teachers than I am high school. The number, and this is all anecdotal, but I'm not seeing high school teachers and they're making copies. Where I'm seeing people and they're making copies are my middle school teachers right now. And of course, we're not one-to-one there, so.
Okay. With 13 seconds left, I'm not asking for go back. So, I am inclined to support the expansion to middle school for FY21. But having said that, as a next step, I would like to have a little more detailed response to my budget questions.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and take my turn before we go backs. First of all, I want to express my appreciation again to every single one of you who've come presented here for us. It's been extremely meaningful for the board. I also want to thank my colleagues for asking some excellent questions. I will just comment that, first of all, the mental health and well-being of our students, many colleagues talked about that. Whether or not the connection or the impact that our one-to-one digital devices have, we are certainly well aware, and Ms. Pelchik, I think you said it extremely well, that smartphones have become almost synonymous with a teenager and even younger children. And because, as Ms. Evans and Ms. Schultz also talked about, we have opportunities here in the school system to help with that education, especially the idea of in our health curriculum. Without question, many of us, and Ms. Schultz, you've been a driving voice on this, digital citizenship isn't necessarily what we're putting upon our students, it's just a reality. And when we talk about educating the whole child, when we talk about Portrait of a Graduate, we have to tie this in and continue in our efforts. And Ms. Loveglass, I know you've done exceptional work along with the superintendent's teams in figuring out ways to continue to improve upon our digital citizenship. And hearing that today, I think, continues to be an area of focus for the board. In terms of looking at other issues like keyboard training, I come from old school 1980s experience. My parents made me take keyboarding. It was one of the most boring classes I ever had. But I went on to become a history major and in college, and let me tell you, those keyboarding skills were a lifesaver. So as our students and the parent, you've been so eloquent in talking about the laptop, the digital devices, they are almost in every career, every job setting that we're preparing our students for. You have to know how to be using this. And if we're going to bring this down into the middle school level, which I'll comment on in a second, keyboarding training is going to be essential because we don't want students plucking, and we also don't want them developing carpal tunnel or anything else that's going to come from not knowing how to type properly. I am very much in favor of PTA and pyramid nights for digital citizenship, and just frankly bringing the good news about what are the values of FCPSOn. So I want to make sure that's a key part of what we do next. I would like more follow-up information as a next step on where are we on the status of online textbook usage in this county. I continue to hear concerns about screen time, and I want to better understand that. The balance of technology and traditional instructional methods. I come from the daughter of a high school teacher. Nothing can replace passion and joy that teachers bring into the classroom. And now I get to have a go back because I finished up my 3 minutes, and there are a few key things I just want to make sure are said. Go backs. I have Karen Keys-Gamarra, Tom Wilson, Sandy Evans, Elizabeth Schultz, Dahlia Palchek, myself, and then I would ask that you keep it to a 1-minute go back.
All right, so I'm going to mention a few things that I think should probably be next steps. I just want to make sure they're included. I have been hearing some comments about the impact of this particular program on isolation. What can we do going forward to try to make sure we're addressing that, and also communicating to parents how we're addressing that. The other one, there was mention of cell phones, and Ms. Lovegalas, you mentioned what the recommendations are. Parents are saying to me they're not sure what the position of FCPS is, so how can we better get that information out? Let's see. I want to make sure we create, or if we don't already have, a method for parents to communicate, so almost like what the Auditor General has, sort of a call-in to mention what their concerns are. I'd like to see if there's a possible way to make sure that parents feel that they have a way to communicate with us what their concerns are, as well as students, without having to go through a teacher or an FCPS staff member. So that would be another follow-up, next step.
Ms. Keesmaar, wrap it up because you're at a 1.5 already.
I am? Yep. That was my, okay. Then I'd also, as a next step, like to see a plan for digital citizenship, and also the young man's recommendation that there be a bridge to SR&R, as well as blue light, how we communicate that we need to implement that. And I will stop with that.
Excellent. So in fairness to all, you now have 2 minutes each, and that is it. I have Mr. Wilson, followed by Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. So I'm just going to give these as questions, and if you have answers, please feel free to answer them. So the first question I have is there data, after probably not, but is there data on whether or not we've improved our college readiness rates through the implementation of FCPSOn? Have we looked into filling in another gap, which I think exists at some schools, where there aren't enough children to fill out a full, say, BC Calculus class, of allowing groups to be in online groups where students across schools could come together to have a class taught so that they can get access to that part of the curriculum. I'd like to hear a report on the FCPS on implementation within the special education community, so that we have a clearer sense of how inclusion is working within the special education community. I know we've got some anecdotes from William, thank you very much, but I'd like a little bit more on that. I'd also like to know, of those kids who opted out of getting a computer, which you said was 133 students, I'd like to know another piece of information, since William mentioned that there are students who are bringing their own device and taking a computer. How many of those students do we have? Because I think we ought to keep an eye on if we've got a bunch of laptops that are sitting collecting dust at home. And then finally, there's almost 21,000 existing laptops that rolled down from the high schools. If we could get some information on, are the schools that receive those receiving the same PD? Are they getting the same parental supports and engagement, et cetera? So it's quite a few, but.
So, Ms. McLaughlin, I'm going to suggest that unless the board member really wants a response right now, we take these as next steps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a great time management approach. Mr. Wilson, thank you for great questions. All right, I have Ms. Evans, Ms. Schultz, and then myself.
I'm just going to follow up on Mr. Moon's budget question, and specify too that, and perhaps this was implied in what Mr. Moon said, but I do want to see the total costs for the rollout, both the total costs for high school, and I believe we have that in the works already, but I just wanted to make sure that we get that total cost, as well as in what form we're receiving it. If it's purchasing the devices, or if it's leased devices, I'd like to see what the total cost would be for rolling out FCPSOn in totality. Divided up by level. I think that's important for us to see, and I appreciate having this specificity for middle school. One comment on middle school, and I don't know if we are today expected to weigh in. No, not on. We're not making a decision. All right, so I will just make a statement that I made before, that as one board member, I would like to see us roll this out. We've already done it at the high school level, but in the future, I think we should be rolling it out to the schools where the need is the greatest. I was in a minority of those that felt that way about the high school rollout, but I think as we move forward, I continue to support rolling it out for the schools where the need is the greatest. We do have students at some of our elementary schools where they don't have internet at home and they have no computer at home, and I would like to see those students get the computers among the next round.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Ms. Schultz?
I completely agree with Ms. Evans. That was my advocacy from the outset. I do want to thank William for highlighting the issues of digital citizenship. It's something I think, like I said, I think it's been 6 years. Digital citizenship is digital access, e-commerce, digital literacy, digital law, digital health and wellness, digital security, digital communication, digital etiquette, and digital rights and responsibilities. Every one of our students should be competent in all of those areas about where that affects them. With respect to the Schoology, I want to know if the Schoology is being purchased specifically because Google Classrooms does not allow parent access. I'm going to highlight again the family engagement survey. I hate to hammer, but I'm going to hammer until I see it. We were very good about highlighting the 3 points in the digital family survey that worked in our favor. We are not good about highlighting the distance that families feel from their curriculum. And with all due respect, I appreciate the student perspective that you don't need your parents to know what you're learning. That's not true. Parents do need to understand, first of all, what the objectives are that their students are learning. They need to know that they're learning them, and then in the end, when they either haven't learned them or have learned them, they need to be competent that they have acquired the knowledge. That is not the role of the school system and the student alone. Students the school system is supposed to be a parent with a partner with the parents in their students' education. And there is a feeling in the parent community, as evidenced in that survey, that we don't know. And I think it's even higher, if I recall the data, at the middle school level. We're not ready. The fact that we're still getting new filtering, I mean, the kids were watching Hulu at the beginning of the school year. We committed to doing this rollout a long time ago. So our filtering, we haven't,
wrap up, please.
Okay, we haven't caught up, and I need to be competent and understanding that we have the infrastructure and filtering in place and connections with parents before we add any more to what we're doing.
I have my go back, but Dr. Braybrand, were you wanting to speak first?
Can I just get an answer to my question about the Schoology, if that's being purchased
Absolutely, yep.
specifically
So
because
Schoology is, the initial reason was because the Blackboard contract is expiring, so we went out for a new learning management system. In the requirements for the RFP, we included the requirement for parent accounts.
when are we going to have how do you say it again?
Schoology.
When are we going to have that in place?
It's piloted, will be piloted next year. Oh, piloted in this, yeah, piloted next year.
Okay. I can't support anything until that's in place because we don't have parent access to Google accounts.
I appreciate that, Ms. Schultz. Just a clarifying question, when we say next year, are we talking about come 2020 January, or are we talking fall 2021 school year?
Yeah, fall 20, a year from now.
So a year from now into the school year, okay.
Yeah, beginning of the school year, a year from now.
Okay, for my go back, I did want to also make sure I weighed in, especially for Dr. Braybrand and your team, on where we are for the middle school rollout. While this has been one of the best work sessions I've ever sat in on for the FCPSOn and what we're trying to accomplish here in the school division, and I certainly appreciate the incredible opportunities it's providing all of our students, and the students here today were particularly eloquent about the many, many advantages of FCPSOn. However, middle school is different from high school. And this board, I'm proud to say, we did not turn around at one of our prior decision-making points and say, just roll it out K-12. I mean, I want the public to understand we have been very judicious and very careful in saying with each area, each segment, high school to middle school to elementary school, let's know what we're doing. Let's make sure this is the right thing to be doing for students. So my request to my colleagues, and especially to our board chair, is we will need a follow-up work session to talk about whether or not this board, where we are on the rollout for middle school one-to-one digital devices. We'll need the next step questions answered and brought to that time. We will need a deeper dive into the Fairfax County middle school pilot. So we talk about the Chantilly Pyramid. What I would like is a real deep discussion along with a panel like today that will talk about how has the middle school pilot gone in the Chantilly Pyramid, and being able to look at other school divisions around the country that are a model for using one-to-one digital devices at the middle school level. I think those will be very crucial to helping this board. I do know this is a budget impact, and Ms. Lefglass, you were very helpful for letting us know timeline and why this is important. But I do believe that this is going to be crucial for us making the best decisions possible for our students. Dr. Brabrand, did you want to speak before we go to next steps?
I do want to make just a couple of quick comments. Are there more board members who still haven't had a chance to speak?
Ms. Palchuk said she had a very quick.
Very quick. First of all, well, and follow up on Ms. McLaughlin, we do have the Principal Franklin's Middle School, so if that or any other middle schools were in the pilot, would love to hear that. I'm sorry we didn't have her come up earlier. And then secondly, I just wanted to clarify with the devices we're using, since they are now on the 4-year renovation cycle. So are we no longer looking that the high school devices would eventually go to middle school? Like we'll find the appropriate device for each grade level. Is that correct?
We've finished the roll down from the high school. So what we would be doing when we roll out middle school next year is we would roll out existing middle school machines to elementary. And when we roll them down, they're not rolling down for one-to-one. They're rolling down to replace 8, 10, 12-year-old machines that are in carts and those kind of things. So they're replacing really, really old stuff.
Okay, yeah. So
but not to be taken home.
Okay, so just if we continue rollouts at lower levels, I would just want to ensure that we're finding the most appropriate device for each grade level.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Brabrand?
Just a couple of quick things. I know we're past time. I just want to make a few comments. I'm so proud of this team. I believe this is the most successful large-scale implementation of digital devices in the country. And Mary Beth and Sloan, you and your team deserve a big round of applause. We weren't the first to do devices, but we've done it best. We took the feedback, we listened to stakeholders, and not only have we done it well in implementation, we've brought you a full partnership. Not just a few staff members, not just members of the leadership team. And these folks were brought in, all of the different stakeholders, intentionally for you to hear the glows and the grows. I do want you to know our folks are ready at the middle school to take the next step. And I believed in partnership from the beginning. I think part of why we were slower, to be honest, is you felt administration was making decisions and board was hearing afterward about a pilot or afterward about an implementation. We're alongside you, telling you our best recommendations and our best thinking, and our best thinking is to move forward with middle school FCPSOn next year. We gave you the budget 4-year costs. We'll be glad to do the additional breakdown so you can see the whole package. And I want to be upfront and say that it was clear from board members last year when we did FCPSOn at the high school that the packaging of the total cost left some people confused about what the true cost was. So I take responsibility for that as superintendent, and I won't make the same mistake twice moving forward with FCPSOn. And just finally, I'll say it was powerful to have the students here. If you had to hear anything, hear the voices of kids. This school board has stood for equity from the very beginning. And this is equity not only of access, but today, in a way, I heard it even more powerfully, equity of accessing the curriculum. Who gets the curriculum? Is it just happening at school? Is it getting to happen at home? Does it get adjusted for my reading level and my skill set? This is going to help accelerate Portrait of a Graduate, and it's going to help us accelerate closing gaps. And our folks are ready. We look forward to partnering with for another work session, and I look forward to bringing you my budget that has this as part of the totality of things that we want to do for the coming year. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Dr. Ivy?
I just wanted to add that as the former Region 5 Assistant Superintendent and having been a part of the Chantilly Pyramid rollout, I am confident that the principals and staff at Franklin Middle School and Rocky Run would be more than helpful in providing additional information to the board.
Wonderful, thank you. And Dr. Brabrand, I appreciate what you've talked about is how important it has been to this board that we are engaged with the public throughout this entire process. And so I think today the board has certainly talked about, while we understand the merits and the value of the middle school rollout, allowing the board to engage with the public and really talk about the merits will be extremely important to us. Here is a suggestion I have for my colleagues. Well, first of all, to the panelists, again, thank you so much. And we're sorry that we kept you much longer than anticipated, but I hope you found that your words were very meaningful to the work we're doing here today. And again, applause to all of you for being here. What I'd like to suggest, because we are running about 40 minutes behind in our schedule, and we do expect to make it up with Project Momentum, which was supposed to start at 2 p.m. Most likely 2:30, 2:45 will be the closer start time. So I'd like to make sure the staff participating in Project Momentum knows that, so that they're not waiting longer than necessary. To my board members, since we're about to go into closed session, I would suggest this. We've been sitting here now for well over 3 hours. So for fresh minds and reflection, I would suggest that we break for our closed session, come back, and we will quickly review the next steps, mostly to see if we've captured all of the next steps, then send that over to the superintendent for the chair and vice chair to review with him. And if there's any concerns about responding to your next steps, we'll communicate with you. That should streamline and make the next steps process a lot faster in light of this extremely robust session. So with that, we are done with the FCPSOn presentation. Thank you again, everyone.
My colleagues, we are going into closed session over lunch, so if I can just read the closed session motion. The board will now make a motion to, excuse me, colleagues, I do need your attention, please. The board will now make a motion to go into closed meeting to discuss and consider personnel matters, specifically the assignment, appointment, performance, demotion, salaries, resignation, and/or disciplining of specific public officers and specific public employees, pursuant to Section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia. 2, to consult with legal counsel regarding litigation or specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Section 2.23711A7 and A8 and A8 of the Code of Virginia, specifically Dovey Board of Education, case number 118 CV 614. And 3, discuss and consider disciplinary and other matters concerning one or more students pursuant to Section 2.23711A2 of the Code of Virginia. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Ms. Strauss, seconded by Ms. McLaughlin. All those in favor, and that is unanimous with Ms. Hines, and who else is missing? That's it. Okay.